Good morning, everyone. Please, we're waiting for a few people to be here, so we are going to be at ease for a few more minutes. Thank you. Good morning and welcome to our subcommittee on local service delivery. I appreciate everyone being here, and we had a little weather issues this morning and it slowed everybody down, but we're very happy to have you here. This committee is looking at throughout our state how services are delivered on the local basis. We have over the last several years heard from citizens about issues that they have, and they vary. It didn't matter if you were in a rural community or if you're in an urban area. So we wanted to find out information, and this is what these meetings are about. They're informational gathering, and we hope to come up with some ideas that we can help all citizens. But this morning we have a very wonderful panel that's going to be here. If you would please come forward. We have Commissioner Carvel Lewis, the chairman of the board of Quitman County. If you'd come to the table. We have Carl Rowland, county administrator at Worth County, and Kevin Tanner, county manager at Forsyth County. Each one of you can introduce yourselves and talk about some of the issues that you see. Again, we heard so many similar issues and problems, but just from a different perspective, depending on where you're at. And we're very happy to have these fine gentlemen here to share what they have identified and what they have as issues in their communities. Let's see. Please go right ahead. Carl, you're in the center square.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I think it's quite a challenge, the topic that you're taking on today. It's been around I've been in local government for 44 years, best I remember. And it's been around ever since I've been in local government. And it's become more of a burden as time runs along. The fact of the matter is we don't have the resources to fund all of the services that we need. My county is 21,000. And there's plenty of times that we need to share services with other counties or do other things. Now, landmass wise, we're one of the largest counties in the state of Georgia. But it's an age-old problem. One of the other issues, I read a study that was done by the organization in Tennessee, and it's Institute of Public Service. I think it's with the University of Tennessee. And one of the things the guy said, Pat Hardy, that there's no empirical data on consolidation or combining the services. We have plenty of ideas of need, but after and those governments that have consolidated, the service has been consolidated, there's just no empirical data being taken to find out exactly what happened. And if we had a little bit more of that, I think you all and we as local governments, we could go on our journey a lot better. Right now, we're facing in our county a jail. We don't need to build a jail. That's my opinion. But you know the other thing they said is that one of the things that complicates county government, and I hope I don't offend nobody, but we're plagued with a lot of elected officials in county government, constitutional officers that bring about a lot of inefficiencies. And we got a nice sheriff, I commend him for everything he does, but one of the deals is on the jail, the sheriff wants a jail for his county. We got a jail 15 miles away that's got plenty of capacity, and that's in Turner County. And it's unfortunate that we're looking at talking to them about it, but there's a lot of drawbacks on that whole issue. I was talking a little bit to Representative Taylor, and one of the things that might help from the state level, the consolidation of services. I know, heaven forbid I say the unspeakable consolidation of county governments is really where we probably need to be. This gentleman to my left right here, I was talking to them about ambulance services here a few months ago, and get out from under a contractual service they got and And I immediately said, the way to do it is y'all consolidate. They were looking at, there's 3 counties involved. I said, y'all consolidate the EMS service and share the cost, and you can do it. That seems simple said, but you know, you got a lot of turf to go through, and you know that. And but I think it's something that I'm glad somebody's looking at it. I'm glad you all are looking at it. I don't know there's any answers. There's plenty of need out there. You've already set the precedence in the state of Georgia in as much as that you only allow 1 license for EMS service in the county. You don't allow cities to do it. You don't allow anybody else to get in the business. You also, under emergency management, you only allow 1 EMA director per county. Cities can't get involved in that. So you've already set a precedent about setting some level of consolidation throughout the counties in the state of Georgia. So I think maybe if you work toward that end, looking at things that's very practical and easy. I mean, there's a lot of services that can be consolidated. The city of Sylvester runs the fire department. The county runs the fire department. And I've talked to them numerous occasions about consolidating the 2. And I guess there's no, the benefit is a financial reward to both city and county if you can consolidate that service. And I don't know how you get the impetus for people to agree to do that, because you're giving up turf. I just don't know. I don't know how you legislate that, quite frankly, but I think it's something that's really needed in the state of Georgia.
I just a quick question that I have. Do you think a lot of it has to be based on the population? I'm thinking that with your population, if it is smaller, you don't have as many dollars, resources, taxes coming in. Is that a level we should be looking at the size? You can only manage it at a certain level. On the other end, one of the things we discovered yesterday is that we had counties where one single county commissioner represented 250,000 people. That's more than a congressman. So we heard from that side of the issue also, but sometimes it seems like the smaller counties don't have the resources because they don't have the population base, and therefore they don't have the resources coming in as far as taxing and ability to fund the things they need.
Well, what's happened in rural Georgia is that when I first, 1978, when I started, there was hardly any exemptions on any sales taxes. Everybody paid them. There's no exemptions on property taxes, but over time, you know, in rural Georgia, and because of agriculture, and agriculture is our basis for the economy, but at the same time, our tax revenue has been slashed because we got exemptions in local sales taxes that's not coming into the government. Probably, I'm gonna just take a quick guess, we're probably getting 70% of what we would have 40 years ago. CUVA and forest land protection, as good as that is, you know, we get some money back from the state of forest flipper, but on CUVA we don't. And I think I looked one time, farmers are paying for agricultural property under CUVA flipper. There is a tax at about 30%, the normal rate. So we're missing out on that. And then we just exempt whole categories of folks from sales taxes. And,
You actually have a question now, Representative Burnell.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Having a little trouble with the mic this morning.
Thank you for that information. I know that in Clayton County, some of the cities have and the county are combining their 911. So do you think it's better if we kind of like start small with the combination of services, or, you know, reducing them as opposed to trying to do something really like major?
Evaluate the efficiencies of it, and I think you can do that, you know. Unfortunately, I mean, I don't know the answer to that. For larger government, I know that at a certain level, you become inefficient instead of more efficient when you're dealing with certain populations. So I think that's got to just, I mean, it's a matter of looking at the finances on it. I was a finance director a lot longer than I was a county manager, and that's what I always leaned on, was doing a feasibility analysis of it, and I think that would answer that question.
Let's see, Representative Anderson, you have a question?
Yes, thank you for coming this morning, first of all, and second, do you know what the millage rate is for the county? They're in Worth County right now. Property tax millage rate.
It's I won't say 11.8 roughly.
Okay, about 11.8.
Yeah,
almost
we
12.
have one of the lowest millage rates in counties anywhere around us.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
Hey.
And I'm sorry, if I may, just one other question. You'd mentioned sales tax exemptions. I'm assuming because of the nature of your county and the industry, the farming industry there, a large portion of that's the gate cards.
It is.
For that. Okay. Thank you.
And unfortunately, it's not just agricultural folks. We got a lot of gate card abusers. Matter of fact, I went to Lowe's to buy some stuff for my fence. I live in town. And the woman said, "Are you using a gate card?" I said, "No." "Should I?" "Well, most people do."
Okay. Thank you.
We have a question from Chairman Oliver.
Thank you, sir. Before my time, Governor Joe Frank Harris had major legislation on area-wide planning, area planning and development. And that particular statutory scheme did result in some joint services around water. Are you familiar with other ways that statute created some service consolidations?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Is ACCG, any of you gentlemen know, ever done a survey of jails across the 159 counties? I'd really be interested to see how many county jails have fewer than X, 10 beds or fewer than 20 beds. How many beds does your jail have in Quitman County?
Yeah,
I'm the one from Quitman. Yeah, we have a holding cell that has 2 beds. We contract with Randolph County, Cuthbert now.
Mhm.
Previously, we contracted with Early County, Blakely. Blakely priced themselves, Early County priced themselves out of our league. So we now contract with Randolph County.
I wonder if AGGC, excuse me, has ever done a real analysis of, say, the 100 or 150 counties that are the smaller counties, about where the beds are and where there's been any sharing, that kind of thing. The federal law says you can't house 17-year-olds with 18-year-olds. And I think most of our counties are in violation of that law one way or another. And I just am always puzzled by this. Every county has to have a 2-bed jail.
I think we missed our mark whenever, years and years ago, judicial circuits were established and legislated. And we don't have an option now. We have to use judicial circuit. But what was forgotten was state courts. Our state court judge, matter of fact, told me, I told him I was coming up here, he's also our county attorney. He says, I don't understand why we don't put judicial state courts in the judicial circuit. We missed the mark on jails whenever we didn't require regional jails per a judicial circuit. So those things have been legislated, they just got missed.
Is it fair to say, or is it just my personal view and I'm wrong, that it's only the sheriffs that are opposed to all that consolidation? Am I wrong that it's only the sheriffs that are blocking that kind of progress?
What's your opinion?
Yes, I won't put it solely on the sheriff, but you are correct. There are individuals within those communities that are self-serving by making sure that they have a jail or maintain or keep the jail because of all of the other benefits of having that in your community, because you might not be getting all your food from one source. You have other sources of providing meals for inmates. So but you're on the same line.
DeKalb County Jail is the largest mental health provider of services in the state of Georgia. It's an enormous hundreds of millions of dollars. And I just don't see a relative comparison to our cost versus your cost without some analysis of what would be an efficient, lawful delivery of services.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You have a question, Representative Maynard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions. One, what determines if you contract out or do a contract with another county to use their jail for capacity versus using your own if it's under capacity versus using your jail in an under capacity?
By the way, we do contract with Turner County for any prisoners over our capacity, and it works very well. So what determines it in our case is we got to have somewhere to put them. And that's the reason, one reason I know it works, because it works now. For example, I think it's all our female prisoners, inmates go to Turner County right now. So it works, but we got some people wanting a new jail.
We have a question from Chairman Collins.
Hey, thank you. What currently do you charge the municipalities in your counties to house prisoners in your jails? Do you know that? Do you know that figure?
We don't.
You don't?
We don't. They take our municipalities take their prisoners to inmates to Turner County.
Okay. And the reason, if I may, just something of some food for thought. I remember when I was mayor and we did our service delivery agreement and an agreement with the sheriffs. One of the things, and I'll say that my sheriff does a great job, and I certainly wouldn't want him to think I was over here criticizing him for anything. But it's kind of a norm in a accepted process that if you have a municipality in a county and the county houses an inmate of the city, the city has to pay the sheriff to look after that inmate. And one of the things I always thought of as a mayor and as a taxpayer in a city, we paid as much county tax as unincorporated areas pay, yet our city had to pay to house those inmates. And I always felt like that was a certain double taxation, if you will, because our city residents contribute just as much, if not more, than what those unincorporated citizens in that county contributed. So that was an area where I've always had a little heartburn, if you will, because, city was being charged to house those inmates, yet we're paying tax, county tax, to fund the operations of the jail. And as we move forward in this, I'd like to look at things in that perspective also, and just fair and equitable treating of cities and counties and look at it from that perspective.
Thank you. And I think that is something that has come up previously and it will come up again. Let's move on. Carl, don't go away, but let's hear something from Forsyth County. If you would, Manager Tanner, if you would tell us a few things.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's good to be here. This is my 32nd year serving in some type of government role. I've been blessed to serve as a county manager, ran a law enforcement agency, and then had the pleasure of serving here in the General Assembly for a number of years and chairing the Transportation Committee here in the Georgia General Assembly. So it's always good to be back here at the Capitol and appreciate seeing some old friends. Forsyth County's somewhat of a unique community in several ways. First, we're a fairly large community and it's grown quickly over the last 30 years. We have about 261,000 people now in the county, roughly 2,000 employees in Forsyth County, but we're unique because we actually only have one city. So I think we're the largest county in the state of Georgia that only has one municipality. Our city has around 7,000 residents. So all the other residents live in an unincorporated area of Forsyth County. As a result of our growth and where we're situated, we adjoin Alpharetta, Johns Creek, the city of Milton, Gwinnett County, Fulton County, Cherokee County. So a lot of our residents expect a very high level of government services. They've come from places like Johns Creek, Alpharetta, Roswell, Sandy Springs. They expect a high level of services. Todd had asked me to cover a few things, and I want to try to do that. He asked me specifically what services Forsyth County government provided, and we provide all the constitutionally required services. So we fund and support all the constitutional officers in our community, all the other elected officials. Forsyth County, our water and sewer for the county is also under our government structure. So the director of water and sewer works directly for me in Forsyth County, and we service close to 70,000 water customers now in Forsyth County through our water and sewer department. We also have a very robust code enforcement division in Forsyth County. Our residents expect a very high level of service. They also complain about a lot of issues. A lot of those issues are not covered by state law. They're covered by local law, by ordinances. And so we have a very robust code enforcement division ran by John Mullen, who used to be in charge of the patrol division and CID here in Sandy Springs. So does a good job, but our residents expect that. We also run a very robust animal services. We have our own animal shelter. We have animal control officers. That's another big issue in our community that's different than some of your smaller communities across Georgia. We also have a big focus on park and rec. We probably have, I would argue, the best park and rec system in the state of Georgia. We have over 2,800 acres in our park and rec system. We run multiple parks. We're nationally accredited. We have Big Creek Greenway, which runs basically from the south side of our community to the north side of our community. It's a multi-use trail. We're getting ready to connect that with the Alpharetta Trail System, which will connect into the Fulton County Trail System. So it's going to be one of the largest continuous trails in the country. So our citizens expect that the outdoor opportunities that we are able to deliver to them. Of course, we also run solid waste and recycling. And one of the things Todd also asked me was some of the biggest service delivery demands and requirements on us at the Forsyth County government. My cohort here had mentioned tax breaks. And one of the things that I would encourage the General Assembly to really take a close look at is anytime that you're looking at legislation that's going to take dollars away from local government, we're still going to have to deliver the same level of service. So those dollars are going to come from a smaller group of individuals and a smaller group of taxpayers. In a place like Forsyth County, for instance, we have a floating homestead exemption. So that means that when your valuation goes up on your property, your county portion of your taxes doesn't go up at all. So you're not paying any additional taxes, even though the value of your property when you bought it may have been $200,000, now it's $600,000. You're still paying the same amount of property tax to the county. We also have senior tax exemption. So once you reach 62, you're paying no school taxes in Forsyth County. So the more opportunities that you have to decrease the pool of taxpayers paying, the more the taxpayers who are still paying end up having to pay. It's increasing their burden because the service demand continues to grow. So I encourage you to be cognitive of that. It may be politically expedient sometimes to pass some of those things, but there is a cost to a certain group of taxpayers here in the state. Someone else mentioned too, I think one of the challenges that we face at county government that cities do not face is that's our relationship with constitutional officers. We have a very good relationship with our constitutional officers in Forsyth County. Our sheriff, for instance, his budget in 2023 will be $60 million. So that just shows you that's much larger than the overwhelming majority of county government budgets across the state, but $60 million sheriff budget. He is either number 2 or 3rd largest sheriff's office now, full service sheriff's offices in the state, because we also do not have a countywide police department. So our sheriff outside the city of Cumming, which only has around 7,000 residents, provides full law enforcement services to over 260,000 residents in Forsyth County. Does a wonderful job doing that. But as you know, constitutional officers have a great deal of power. The county commission's responsible for setting the millage rate and passing a budget. But once that budget's passed, our elected officials have almost complete ability to run their department the way they see fit. So it is challenging, and the cities governments do not face that same challenge because obviously they're in charge of their police department and the other folks running city government. So that's something to keep in mind. There's a big difference between county and city government there. And I mentioned earlier that in Forsyth County, our residents expect city-like services. We only have one city. There was a move a few years ago to create a new city in South Forsyth, and that did not pass. But we have to be cognitive at the local level to be able to provide and to address the demands of our citizens. They're expecting that level of service. If we don't give them that level of service, then they're going to push their state elected officials to create new cities in Forsyth County. So it's a challenge for us each and every day to stay ahead of that and provide high level of service to our residents. Just give you an example of one item is, as you know, we are responsible at the local level to cut grass and to maintain county roads. The state's responsible for maintaining state roads. Russell McMurray, our GDOT commissioner, has a contract with a private provider to cut all state right-of-ways, I think 3 times a year. Our residents on our major parkways that are state roads expect that grass to be cut every 2 weeks. So Johns Creek does that, Alpharetta does that. So our residents not only expect it, they demand that from their elected officials. We were fortunate to be able to work out a deal with the sheriff, and we've actually have an inmate work crew now that's doing that every 2 weeks, manicuring our grass on state roads. We have an agreement with the state to do that. So we're held to a very high standard in Forsyth County. He asked me also to talk a little bit about the uniqueness to having only one city, and I think I've done that. But as it relates to lost and splosh and service delivery. Several years ago, when I was in the General Assembly and Chairman Wendell Willard was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, we attempted to pass a plan to help cities and counties negotiate lost. Every 10 years, by the nature of state law, cities and counties enter into mortal combat with each other. And it creates the most hostile environment of people who normally are friends that you can ever imagine. If you've not been involved in that, it's very challenging. And there is no formula to address what's right, what's wrong. It really comes down to what the city council and what the commissioners can agree to. Whatever that looks like, they send it to the DOR commissioner and it's accepted. If that's not done by December 31st of this year, lost goes completely away in Forsyth County. That's over $60 million of dollars that just go away. That means a huge property tax increase. So I don't know the answer to that. The fix we put in several years ago was found unconstitutional because one branch of government cannot delegate their responsibility to another branch. And that's what the court said. But I do think it would be helpful if this body could take a look at and work with ACCG and work with GMA to come up with a better way, because it is mortal combat as it stands today. And I can only imagine if you had 5, 6, 7 cities, how difficult that challenge may be. It's challenging for us in Forsyth County. One of the things too is the suggestion for improvements on how the state processes new cities. We have a lot of government in Georgia. We have 159 counties, and no matter if you're 20,000 people or 5,000 people, you're responsible for paying all your constitutional officers, having the sheriff, having all those other officials, or if you're 260,000 people. So there's a huge cost that goes along with running state government, regardless of the size. I personally am of the opinion we don't need any more government. We need to try to find ways to provide a higher level of service at the county level and not have more cities. I understand that there's going to be times where those cities are going to be needed in specific cases. I just encourage this body to continue to put a high bar in place before the state of Georgia creates additional layers of bureaucracy for our citizens, which ultimately means more cost to our taxpayers. Also, he asked me to talk about just a few things really quick. How can the General Assembly work not to make any of these challenges worse and possibly improve them? I mentioned lost and service delivery. I think if there's one thing that could be done by this General Assembly, working with ACCG and GMA to come up with a compromise around that, how to improve that system would be number one. One of the things that I know the judiciary branch is talking about is salaries. You would not believe the amount of supplements we pay in Forsyth County to state employees, the judicial branch of government, not only the judges, but their secretaries, their staff, because in a place like Forsyth County, the cost of living, the amount of money we have to pay our employees is higher than it is in many other parts of the state. So our state court, for instance, they're locally funded. All of their positions are locally funded. So I'm paying an admin person for a state court judge much higher than what an admin would be paid by the state of Georgia to be in Forsyth. So then I end up having to pay a supplement to the Superior Court judge's admin. That needs to be addressed. That is a state responsibility. The Superior Court judges, the court system is a state responsibility. I also think it puts the judge in a very challenging position, because if a citizen in our community feels like their property rights have been violated and we've not approved the zoning, they sue us, sue the county, take us to court. We go to Superior Court, but we're funding their salaries at Superior Court. A big portion of that judge's salary discretionary salary comes from the commission. And I just think that needs to be addressed. I know the judicial is looking at that. I encourage you to be a part of that and find a way to increase those salaries. And keep in mind that depending on the part of the state you're in, there is a difference in what those salaries should be. And I mentioned this earlier and I wrote this down. I want to repeat this. I encourage you not to allow political expediency to cause you to make bad decisions that affect local government. I encourage you to stay close to your local commissioners, your city council members, ACCG, GMA. We have unique challenges that are different than the state. Sometimes, and I've been a part of this, it's easy to balance the state budget on the backs of local government, but it's all taxpayer money. And any changes that are made that may be good politically to take away a tax burden to a select group of people, but if it doesn't change the level of service, that tax burden is still being paid by a certain group of our society. One of the things too, and I heard this as my colleagues were talking, one of the challenges, biggest challenge, is one size does not fit all. You know, the challenges that's faced maybe in a rural community in South Georgia or a rural community in North Georgia is different than what we face. And I think, and the chair lady mentioned this, and I think this is a misnomer to some degree, that you live in a rural community, so you have less taxes, so you have more challenges. My argument to that is you also don't have the same level of responsibility, right? So in a Forsyth County government, for instance, if I'm managing Union County, or if I'm managing Gemmer County, or if I'm managing Irwin County, people are not going to expect that we're going to have 10 code enforcement officers and we're going to have animal control. We're going to cut state highways and cut the grass on state highways. There's just a lot more demand in our larger communities that take up those dollars. So one size does not fit all in our state. That's why we have the subdivisions that we have of 159 counties. So the more local control you can continue to protect of our local governments, I would encourage you to do that, because what's good for one community may not be good for another. So that's what I was asked to cover, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
You do have a couple questions. Representative Maynard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is for Mr. Tanner. Thank you for the presentation. Very informative. Everyone has been very informative. Some pre-questions first. Do you know what your poverty level is in Forsyth?
It's extremely low. We're one of the wealthiest counties in the state of Georgia. We have one of the best school systems in the state. Our average home price is around $500,000. But I will also tell you that one of the challenges, and I was talking to the school superintendent about this, we have a very large school system. But he said 5,000 students in our school system, if they were in a school system by themselves, would be a failing school by definition. So I think that the school does a good job of, even though their numbers are off the chart and they could just get by with those numbers, they've identified that there is a need there in the community, and they're working to address that. We also, our county partners with a lot of our nonprofits to really work for the population that is underserved and is not at the same level as some of the rest of the community.
The reason I asked that is because you mentioned several times high level of maintenance, constituents are demanding. And my concern is just being a representative for an underserved, marginalized community. Just sometimes if people are living in poverty, it's not that they have low expectations, it's just that they have a lack of understanding of what government services are. And so as a result of that, you may get no services just because there's no demanding expectation. And so I understand your piece about local control, but I do think, to your point, how every community is different. As we make legislation, we do need to consider that some communities that are impoverished or living in poverty, just because they're not demanding things, we still need to make sure that they're getting clean roads and sidewalks that are not broken, and school systems. And that's why I asked you, because I know you have one of the best school systems in the state, that our school systems are addressing the needs of the children. But the other question I have is, let's see, for the supplemental salaries, are you as the county manager determining what those supplemental salaries are, or is the county commissioner determining the supplemental salaries for the judicial staff?
I'd like to answer both of those. The first part of your talking about the local, every local government's different. Some people, I always go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? People are not concerned about the grass on the state highway if they don't know where they're going to lay their head down at night. They're not concerned about the grass on the state highway if they don't have the money to put food on the table for their children. So I think when people are full and they're living in a nice home, they can sit around and worry about those things. So I agree with that. But I also would like to say that that's why we have local elected officials, right? So in your community, those people who are elected by those folks who have those needs. And that's why the government works best, in my opinion, when it's the closest to the people, because I don't know what your community needs and what your community's needs are. But the person who's elected to that county commission that comes from that community, they understand that. The second part is what happens with the supplements. Part of our budget process every year, if the chief judge, for instance, Superior Court, feels like there needs to be some additional supplements, he brings that as part of his budget request. Ultimately, we have a finance committee, which I chair, has 3 commissioners, myself and the CFO. We make recommendations and then it goes to the full board of commissioners. They ultimately have to vote on those as part of the overall budget. Once it's voted on, they cannot be removed by the county commission until that person's term ends. So once they could remove that if that person's up for reelection and say, we're taking this away, but during that term, it can't be removed once it's instituted.
Thank you. You have another question, Representative Oliver?
Sharon Springs was the city that for the first time in its legislation to create that opportunity for a new city in Forsyth County imposed a minimum vote of, I think it was 55%, maybe 57%.
57.
And I asked you 3 gentlemen whether or not we should statutorily impose some measure of voter support for a city above 50%. And I won't just tell Madam Chair, that's something I'm going to bring back to this committee because I'm really interested in that concept. All the cities in Cobb failed this year. And I think the other city that failed before that was Sharon Springs. So I'm just curious if the 55% or 57 or 53 would be appropriate voter support. I ask your opinion.
I'll take that first, if that's okay. I agree with you for a couple of reasons. Number one, we obviously live in a republic, which we elect people to be informed and to be educated on topics. I think if we're going to create a new layer of government that has the potential to take away some of our abilities and our rights and to govern us in a higher level and to tax our citizens long-term, then that needs to be more than just a simple majority of a vote to do that. If there is a great will to do that in a community and there's just this great demand, then there shouldn't be anything wrong with setting a little bit higher standard, because just having one vote make a decision on whether or not it's a majority or not is dangerous, in my opinion. People don't always like what they get because they don't know what they're necessarily asking for. So ours was at 57%. I was in the delegation at the time when we did that. We worked closely with Chairman Todd Jones, who lived in that area and represented that area. And he was gracious enough to say that if y'all really want this city, then it needs to be more than just a majority vote. And it failed. And the county, I think, has learned from how to provide services at a better level. And hopefully we've put that issue to bed. But I think that's a good idea.
I agree. I think that it ought to be a much higher percentage. My colleague hit the nail on the head a while ago when he said, if the city's wanting to, if a portion of the county wants to become a city, something's lacking. We need to provide a better level of services. And I think counties should be given that opportunity. If the legislature approach, first thing to be given is anything you can do to make that section of your county happy. And then in any case, I think it ought to be 60% or better vote to make it happen. But I think counties should be given an opportunity to step up to the plate.
Okay.
I agree with, we don't need any more level of government or more governments.
I feel the same way. I don't.
We have,
May I follow up on the supplement?
sure.
That's very controversial around my area. And you may remember, you may have been here, Representative Powell, Jay Powell, put a cap on the supplements for the Judiciary Superior Court, and that there's constant effort to kind of remove that cap. And I'm very interested in whether the ACCG or Council of Superior Court judges are ever going to take a position on that, because I think there's a internal division, maybe an internal division on whether to remove the cap, the $50,000 supplement, which DeKalb and Fulton and a bunch of other counties pay.
And I can't speak for ACCG's official policy position on that, but from my personal perspective, I think that a cap is a good thing, but I think the most important thing is trying to find a long-term solution to shift that burden over to the state and away from the counties when it comes to the state employees. I just, somehow in the past, we've gotten into this situation of paying these supplements. And once you start that, it's very difficult to pull it back. So I think the state taking that on, working closely with the judicial branch of government in this body would be a big win. Be a money saving issue for the counties because we're paying a lot of money out in supplements. We do supplements for our sheriff. We do supplements for our magistrate, our probate judge. It's costly, it's challenging, but especially the judicial branch. I think that needs to be covered by the state.
We have a couple more questions, but before we get to them, just hold your questions. I want to go on, if I could, to Commissioner Lewis. I have especially wanted to hear from you today. And I did it this way so we could see the difference from a large community and a much more urban area, even though you have countryside. So I really want to hear some of your issues, if you would address us now. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Good morning again to everyone. I'm Carvel Lewis. I chair the Georgetown, Quitman County Consolidated Government Board of Commissioners. Georgia has 118 counties. That's 74.2% of our 159 counties that are classified as rural. We have 46 that are 20,000 to 50,000. We have 36 that are 10,000 to 20,000. We have 28 that are 5,000 to 10,000. And then Georgetown, Quitman County has the distinction of being one of the 8 that has less than 5,000. We have a population of a little over 2,200. And that is the main reason why when I left DeKalb County and moved home, that I pushed for consolidation so that there would be less government and a higher level of service delivery. I'm a son of Georgia. I am 7th generation. The 2 generations prior to the 5th, the first 2 generations came over as slaves. My family left Stewart County, came to Quitman, and made that their home. Most of my family still resides in Southwest Georgia, either Stewart County, Randolph County, Quitman County, Clay County, Sumter, or Muskogee. We're in agriculture, we're small business people. We love Georgia. When you look at rural Georgia, you're going to find people who love Georgia. We've had a lot of people move in from Florida, Mississippi, Tennessee, and because they see small rural, they think they don't have to pay for anything. So we look at, going back to what my colleague from Forsyth County stated, how to provide services when you have a small population. Our biggest challenge to date is emergency medical services. We've talked about that. Grady came to Southwest Georgia with a presentation, and I think Grady was able to get 26 counties to join in. Now we're down to 14, and I think as soon as the board that governs Grady meets, they're going to drop Southwest Georgia like a hot potato because today is the 21st. Quitman County has only had people show up to work to drive the ambulance 3 days this month. We had an elderly gentleman on Lake Walter F. George, and if many of you know where Quitman County is south of Columbus, most folk like to say Lake Eufaula. Lake Eufaula is this big. Walter F. George is this big. But because Eufaula is larger and we're rural and country, everybody wants to identify with that. But the gentleman had difficulties on the lake. The probate judge, our emergency medical services, our emergency EMA director called me. I was at the gym in Eufaula, left the gym and met them because my family owns funeral homes. So I actually have stretchers, I have a hearse, I have all that good stuff. We didn't need the hearse, but we needed the stretcher. We had to provide services because no one wanted to come to work for Grady. On Monday of this week, we had a town hall meeting, the largest crowd that we have had to date, because our commissioners proposed an assessment of $240 per parcel to be on the tax bill to cover the cost of a contract with either Gold Star Ambulance out of Albany or AmeriPro Health out of, I think they're in Clayton County, might have an office in Dunwoody. We're at a point where we have to decide, are we going to buy dogwoods and magnolia trees to put on the causeway between Eufaula and Georgetown? Am I going to have a part-time coach for Parks and Recreation? When you talk about your Parks and Recreation, sir, I would just like to have 1/100th of your budget. I could make it go a long way. Our budget is $2.9 million. The vice chairman, Danny Blackman, and myself are 2 small business owners. We have probably irritated Gerald Green and Freddie Powell Sims to death. And ladies and gentlemen, I will say for the record, Gerald, I'm not trying to date you, but he taught me high school social studies. And I was Randolph Clay's star student. And usually when you're the star student, you pick your math or science teacher. But I was a sock stud at Governor's Honors at Valdosta State. So I chose my social studies teacher. So he's my star teacher. But we're constantly coming to Atlanta to find out how the legislature can help us. We're in a food desert. We don't have a grocery store. However, we got a new Dollar General. And my son was extremely pleased at the fact that I could give him $5 before the recession to go in and buy fruit. Now I have to give him $7 because the bag of peaches has gone up to $6.25. But our Dollar General now has a frozen food section, a fresh vegetable and fruit section. So we're able to provide those staple items to the people in the community that don't have a way to get to Eufaula. Every grocery store chain, every independent grocer said that they would not come to Georgetown because we have Eufaula 5 minutes away. Eufaula has a Walmart, they have a Winn-Dixie, they have 2 Piggly Wigglies. But the state of Georgia, we don't have to pay as much on taxes on food items as Alabama does. Matter of fact, Eufaula is 9.5%. They're about to go up to 11 to match Dothan and Montgomery. But we still can't attract grocery stores to come to our community. Long story short, and I'm going to be like my colleague from Forsyth County, Bill Toomey and Mary Beth have worked on some talking points for me to share with you, but our situation is dire. It really is. When you look at any county south of Columbus and west of Albany, Daugherty County, other than Lee County. This year, well, the past 2 years, I chaired the TIA committee for the River Valley Regional Commission because of T-Splash. And 10 years ago, most of that money went to Columbus, Muskogee County. And I am not opposed to having dollars go to larger areas. But one of the things that I stuck to this year was that every county, every city might not, but every county was going to have a project. Because every county has citizens, and those citizens are going places to spend money, and those tax dollars going into the pool for us to share. So in doing that, I got a chance to look at all of those counties closely. Randolph County, Cuthbert, Georgia, has Andrew College. They have the city of Shellman. But they have lost more population than all of the neighboring counties combined. A part of that is job opportunity. The other part of that is housing. Quitman County, we never got a public library building. We always had to use a leftover county building. We never had a housing authority because of the predecessors that were elected. We never got those things. But when I became chairman, one of the things that I wanted to do was fight to get a public library. The governor came down in April, we had our grand opening. We have a brand new public library across the street from our recreation department, same street as the public school system. And we have a K through 12 system. We have 333 students. My son Tristan will be a 5th grader. The school is an Apple Ed school, which means that all of our students have iPads, which might not mean a lot to a lot of people, but for us, it means a lot because only 30% of our households have broadband connectivity as of now. But Diverse Power has been given that grant through that appropriations mechanism with some of the COVID dollars, where we should have broadband in the county within the next 6 to 12 months. And that's going to help us with economics. But I'm going to stop there because I'm sure that what I have shared has generated a lot of questions. But just know that with a county our size, the largest employers are the school system and a manufacturing company known as D&J Plastics. And we cannot continue to provide services adequately off the backs of the taxpayers because the bulk of my budget comes from property tax. Now, we did a revalve and the valuations of about 22% of our property owners went up. But that increase would not equal to what we need to pay for the new contract with the EMS service. So we're going to roll that back because we know that it's difficult and they're tough times. Most of our citizens work at the chicken plant in Baker Hill, Alabama, or most of them are retired and they get a Social Security check or SSI check. So I'm going to stop there.
Okay, now I think everybody sees why I was so wanting to hear from you. I'm in that region. I'm further south and our circumstances are a little different in Thomas County. But I have witnessed from afar, I've done business with folks in your area. So what is the number one thing? What would help you and your residents the most? That's a big question,
It
and I
is.
get it.
Oh, yes. I have an immediate, but then I have long-term.
Okay, both.
The immediate assistance would be just as we have T-Splash. There needs to be a mechanism in which rural counties in the state could share dollars to fund whatever services they are unable to provide adequately.
Would it work coming out of the, I guess it's the regional district commissions that we have?
Yes.
To put it through there and let it be dispersed? Okay, and a long term?
Long-term would be to really have individuals like ourselves on a commission or body to look at those services that can be realigned. Going back to your question about 911, several years ago, maybe 12, we created the Southwest Georgia E911, and it included the counties of Stewart, Randolph, Clay, and Quitman. All four of us played well together in the sandbox. But because that authority was housed on the second floor of the Clay County Sheriff's Department, Randolph County felt that they weren't getting the same services as Clay County. And then Stewart County defaulted and didn't pay, and we had to sue them. So the same things will come up in the future because, again, we're dealing with individual counties, individuals representing those counties. But there are mechanisms in place for us to work together to solve some of those issues. We just have to be better stewards of making sure that the people that we put on those boards are representing the best interest of the communities and not just themselves.
I know you mentioned that teaching and those are your larger employers. What industry are you? 100% ag? Are you forest preservation? I know that affects your tax base. That's your, okay.
Yes, we've had several large pieces of property to come up for sale. Floridians buy it and it immediately goes into conservation. So we don't have the opportunity to purchase it for subdivisions. And it makes it difficult when companies want to come to Georgetown. We've had the opportunity and we're waiting on the family to come from Minnesota. But there is a company called Forester Pontoon, and they manufacture pontoon boats. And they're very interested in having a presence in Southeast America. So they've looked at Georgetown, Quitman County because of the lake and the river. And hopefully we will make that come to fruition, and that will be 20 to 40 jobs. And with all the other hats that I wear, I'm on the State Technical College System Board. So I will make sure that we have free training from Columbus Tech and Albany Tech and South Georgia Tech. So,
Is the state economic development helping you with this project?
oh, now you've brought up another issue. We have been working with them as well as DCA for funding for the company through, and I think it's an arm of One Georgia, and it's what the governor has created, that Rural Innovation Fund. We are going to receive funding from that. But one of the things that I read, and I know you all will have complete control over this, but that was an arduous task for our finance officer and one of our commissioners to deal with government or agency representatives.
I'll ask, but do you have an economic development person on your staff? Okay, that's what I thought.
That would be
Another
me.
hat.
Yeah, another hat. Rural Georgia is going to always have needs because we don't have the people in place. If we didn't have GMA to help the cities and ACCG to help the counties and the regional commissions, we wouldn't have the technical assistance. But when people that answer a call every day about buying dirt and getting a permit have to deal with someone in Atlanta who doesn't understand, it makes everything completely complicated.
Thank you. We do have some folks with questions.
Okay.
Representative Burnell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for all of this excellent information. And I will have to say to Chairman Tanner that Clayton County has also won those awards for Parks and Rec. And so I'm going to invite you to come and see our wonderful new water park that we have. It is really fantastic. In fact, it's where the Olympics was for the beach. They turned into a water park. And the other question, we've been talking back and forth about how that with counties and not adding cities. And one of the things I want to ask is, do you think that because it keeps coming up that there's a lot, that those commissioners represent a large number of residents, that maybe we should add another commissioner? I mean, I know that's a local level decision, but to add another commissioner as to so that more those people will feel like they're getting the representation that they need.
I think that's definitely a good consideration. I know Forsyth, we have 5. There are some places that have 7 or more. But I do think that there can get to a point where you're representing too many people to be able to be effective. So I think as the county grows, that definitely has to be a consideration with the local delegation, the local commission, and their constituents making that determination. But I do think that's a better alternative than considering adding additional cities.
Okay. And then the other question that I had was, you were talking about that that the individuals didn't want to work for Grady. So, and what hospital were they going to?
It really depended upon your condition at the time that the EMTs or paramedics arrived. Eufaula is 5 minutes away, and they have an arm of the Southeast Alabama Medical Center in Eufaula. But if you were in Clay County, the closest hospital would be Life Bright in Blakely. And if you're in Randolph County, you would choose either to go to Columbus or to Albany to Phoebe Putney.
Okay. And also, and this is just an observation, just based on everything you were saying about rural counties. Madam Chair, I was thinking that maybe on those regional commissions that there's somebody there that is an expert in rural Georgia, so that when those individuals call, they talk to that person becomes their advocate. Because if you have an advocate, you get more services if you have that person, because you're not going to be able to know everything. But if they have somebody that is there to assist them when they call, that will make it much easier because at least they understand what's going on and then they can
Yeah.
explain it to someone else. That's just a suggestion.
I do think the regional commissions, each one are run a little different, and the representatives on them are actually appointed. Each county has a representative on it, and I think each city, or in some degree, have representations on it. I think they're used as a connector a lot of times. They don't have, I know mine does not have a resource of an expert in economic development and an expert on roads there. They try to make those connections in Atlanta. They're helping those smaller communities as a additional resource, but they still have to go through the same red tape. That's kind of my oversight on it. Please share what your thoughts are on it.
You are correct. Just looking at River Valley, heart of Georgia, Southern Georgia, those regional commissions do make an effort in finding those persons that do have experience with rural America, more specifically with rural Georgia. And you are correct in terms of the connectivity. GDOT has done an exceptional job in working with regional commissions, especially because of T-Splosh, to identify federal opportunities, to take care of things that we can't take care of. We had a resident in Georgetown, well, in Mars, in the Old County portion, who called DOT because of a bridge. He didn't realize that his big mouth would cause the bridge to be closed, which would make his commute home about 20 minutes longer. And it stayed closed because, of course, we had to bid out that whole process of getting the bridge taken care of. But we did not have to fund that because of state and federal dollars. And without that assistance, we would be bankrupt, literally. Because most people don't realize you can't pave a dirt road anymore unless you win Mega Million. Because it costs now, I would say about $100,000 per mile, maybe.
No, more than that.
More than that.
We do our own road construction, but
Okay.
paving alone is 180.
Okay, 100,000.
That's-
Right.
That's usually,
Okay.
that's not you putting asphalt on it either. That's a triple
Service.
type treatment.
And my county still has about 52 miles of dirt road.
And we got 450.
I know.
Please put that in the mic. I don't think that came across. How many miles you have?
450.
Okay. Okay. Representative Maynard, you have a question?
I do. I don't know if I have a limit, but I have several
Go
questions.
right ahead.
The first one is the supplemental salary caps. Are they based on a cost of living equation or people just cap them out?
What these supplements we're talking about are paid to state employees. So anytime the state gives a cost of living raise, they're getting that. So you all decide that at the General Assembly every year, what the cost of living should be. You also can give, like you did this year, across the board $5,000 raise to all the elected officials. So the supplement cap would not be related to that. That would be a separate issue. But what those folks should be making, what their salaries should be set at, what the cost of living should be, really is supposed to be determined by this body, not by the local governments.
Okay, and so, but right now, the county commissioners are doing that for us at the local level with the judicial staff.
In a lot of counties, I can only speak for our county, we do give supplements to our judiciary. Like Chairman Oliver mentioned, that's capped at a maximum now, and most of your metro counties have hit that maximum. Again, I think the answer to that is for the state to take a good look at how they can better handle the judicial salaries and make sure that the state's paying those positions at the rate they need to be compensated for, depending on the population, depending on the area, so that local governments are not going to be required to pay supplements.
Okay, and then Mr. Lewis, your budget 2.9 million, is that right?
Yes.
And out of that, what percentage goes to your constitutional officers? Do you know?
if I do the quick math, 2, 3. With the sheriff, it's over 60, it's almost 68%.
So almost 68% of your budget goes to salary.
Well, when you said constitutional officers, I want to make sure you understand that the sheriff's department has line items that are not just salary, just as the
Okay.
tax commissioner. So when you look at the budgets of those 4 offices, probate judge, clerk of superior court, tax commissioner, and sheriff, because we only have one policing arm, which is the sheriff's department, it's about 68% of our budget.
Okay, thank you. And also for you, Mr. Lewis, when you were talking about, some needs that your community has, when you look at your geographic footprint, can you describe what blight looks like, if you have any blight, greenfield space, how much is agriculture, how much are the conservationists coming and taking? Because I'm trying to get an idea of, in a rural area, how much space is available for economic development.
Let's see if I can paint a good picture for you. What part of the state are you from?
I am from the city, but I have rural roots.
Okay. Quitman County at one time was 80% agricultural. We had very little forest land. But as the farmers died out and their children decided to maintain the land but not go into farming, they brought in forestry. So economically, it is difficult for us because we now have a county water system that covers the entire county, but we do not have a county sewer system. The sewer system is only in the old city of Georgetown, which is about a 5 square miles. So when companies are looking to come in, they want to have all their services readily provided. Now, we do have some land that is located along the sewage line to the treatment plant that we could develop. And that's about 70 to 80 acres of land. We only have 3 families left that do row crops. We have about 4 families that do cattle, but that would be the limit of our agriculture. And everything else is going to be commercial or rural, or either R1 or A1 in terms of planning and zoning. I used to be on that board too.
Okay, and then I have one more question, if I can read my writing. Well, 2 more. Some people have been texting me online. If anybody can just explain for the viewing audience what millage rates are, as well as, I'll come back to that, but if you guys could explain millage rates to the audience online. And then the other last thing is this: when you mentioned the lake incident and the EMA director and the probate judge, were you saying that the probate judge is the EMA director?
No, those 3 separate persons.
Okay.
3 separate persons. And for the record, Georgetown, Quitman County does have a probate judge, but under that individual's heading will be magistrate court as well as elections. We're not large enough to have our own election board, election supervisor, all that kind of stuff. All of that is housed in that one office.
And then this is the last thing, I promise. So this is just a thought. If people in your community are going to Eufaula to shop, then we're taking Georgia's tax dollars to another state.
That is correct.
Okay, that's it.
Yes. You want to tackle millage rate, Mr. Okay.
I'll try to answer that millage question for you, or for the audience. In Georgia, all property is assessed, and there's state law that governs it, and the Department of Revenue has regulations that govern it. Typically, in most counties, I think, have a board of assessors. Those Board of Assessors are typically appointed by the county commission. There's usually 5 of those Board of Assessors members. Once they're appointed, they're independent. They cannot, the commission can't decide, I'm going to take Kevin off as the Board of Assessor unless he's impeached. So it has to be for cause. They serve a term, and during that term, it's their responsibility to run the tax assessor's office. Typically, they hire a chief appraiser, a chief assessor. That person's responsible for day-to-day operations. The assessment board, they're just paid a per diem when they have a meeting. They then are responsible for creating the digest or the assessment of all property in a county. It's mass appraisals, so it's not like if you're going to sell your house, they're going to give you a specific appraisal just for your house. They look at it at a more global level. They issue an assessment of what your property's value is. That's mailed out in the spring to the citizens. They have an opportunity, I think it's 45 days from the date that you receive that you can appeal. If you disagree with your assessment, the value they've set on your property, the first appeal step is the Board of Assessors. If they don't give you or don't agree with you, then you can appeal to the Board of Equalization. The Board of Equalization in Georgia is run, it's not controlled by, but administratively it's run by the clerk of court. The Board of Equalization members are appointed by the grand jury. If you don't agree with their recommendation, then you can appeal to Superior Court. Now, the millage is set by the governing authority. So in our case, the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners has to have 3 hearings to set the millage rate. One of those hearings has to occur before lunch. So there has to be 3 total. And the public has an opportunity to come in and speak on that. And then the Board of Commissioners sets the millage rate. In our case, in Forsyth County, the commissioners set 3 millage rates. They set the fire millage because we have a separate millage for our fire department. They set the bond millage because we have some general obligation debt that the citizens have voted for that is paid for by property taxes. And then the third is the general operating millage. And that's set. Your taxable value of your property is 40% of the value. So if they value your property at $100,000, you're taxed on $40,000 minus any exemptions, whether it's school exemptions, homestead, whatever the case might be. And then that's multiplied out by your millage rate, which typically in Georgia for a county, ours is our total county millage for the county government is 7.981. And then the schools added on top of that. That creates how much you owe the local government. In addition to that, the school board, of course, does the same process as far as setting a millage in the local city. One of the other things too, just real quick, Madam Chair, you had asked about, and I will tell you, listening to the way you're talking about your community, Ted Bearden's here on a different matter, but he and I grew up about a mile from each other. And I still, and he does, live in Dawson County, which is a much smaller community than Forsyth that I manage. All the issues you talked about is the same that when we grew up. Funeral home ran the ambulance service. We didn't have a grocery store. It took 45 minutes and it was a treat every Friday to get to go to Gainesville to go to the grocery store. So, but you asked a question, Madam Chair, what could the state do to help? And I just want to tell you, in our community, a couple of things that made a difference that helped us change from a very, very poor community to a place that has a lot of opportunities. One was water and sewer. Water and sewer is important. Because if we're going to have, because economic development is the thing that raises everybody up, but you got to have water and sewer and you got to have broadband if you're going to compete. So the state, as they push those issues, if they're going to invest, I think water, sewer, and broadband are key, and transportation. If you have good transportation network, if you have water and sewer capabilities, then you have broadband to the level that these folks are looking for, there's great opportunities. Because the problem we have in our area is the unemployment is so low that it's difficult sometimes to attract manufacturing and attract industry because there's not the employment base. That you have that employment basis in a lot of places in rural Georgia, but the challenge is you don't have the broadband, you don't have the water and sewer capabilities. So I think anything the state can do to help in that area and a lot of all of our state would be helpful.
Thank you. We have one final question. Chairman Collins?
It was more just less a comment to what Chairman Oliver had mentioned earlier. And also I want to say thank you to my friend Kevin Tanner for being with us. It was a pleasure to serve with you. And also to Mr. Lewis, I understand about those nonprofits that you're talking about with funeral service. Being a funeral director, sometimes your funeral home is a nonprofit as well. So I understand the way that works. But when we talk about the level that we expect local folks to vote to create a new city, several years ago, I think this state postured itself, and it was correct, where we have no new city school systems, and I think that was a good route for education, and I think it may be getting that way when we talk about incorporation of cities. And it's kind of ironic. You're talking about your community down there in Southwest Georgia. I grew up in Villa Rica, Georgia, with a population of about 4,500 people. Didn't change very much. And then you had this wave of progress that just kept on washing up in West Georgia. And now that little community that I grew up in is totally changed. We're much more of a suburban city. I can remember farmland, agriculture, and now it's subdivisions, and now it's shopping centers. And I can think back to when I was a kid, people would say, "Oh, I wish we had this, I wish we had that." Now we've got all that, we don't want it. And I think that people in the rural areas will probably say the same thing in 30 years. If you got everything you wanted today, people would probably sit around and say, "Man, I wish we had back to the days it used to be." But I just wanted to say to Madam Chair Oliver there, that I completely agree with, we need to raise the bar. We spend a lot of time over here with these cityhood initiatives, and I don't know that any have passed since I've been in the legislature for the last 6 years. The one Eagles Landing failed 2 years ago, I believe it was, and then the table was ran on all of those citihoods this past spring, and they all failed. So that was just really my comment. Thank you for all of you for being here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Chairman Oliver, one last comment?
Just respond briefly. Mr. Freeman needs to be brought into this discussion. Should we have a different percentage of voter approval for a new city above 50%, like Sharon said? We also had some proposals on the table last year on annexations in relation to some additional matters, which is the biggest thing going on in my community right now is annexations instead of new cities, but both are very active. And I'm sure we'll be revisiting some of that discussion.
Yes, you're right.
Oh.
Do you have another comment?
Yes, well, I wanted to add, my memory slipped me there, but in my community, we had the first de-annexation in this state. It was the city of Villa Rica prior to the one in Valdosta several years ago, but it happened in 1990, 91, I believe. My grandfather was on the council when the de-annexation occurred, but the city went from small, increased the footprint, and after a couple of years, those people who were in that new incorporated area were tired of paying city taxes for getting maybe a street light and garbage pickup and a policeman around every once in a while. So they came back to the legislative body and essentially became de-annexed. They were put back in unincorporated Carroll County. Seemed like an easy thing to do. It was big, small. But what had happened in that time was you had the city take on a bond debt for a new sewer plant, a new recreation facility, and it really set our city back probably 20 years because that happened at a time in the early 90s. The census numbers had come out, so our population had went up, and then by the 2000, the population had decreased almost twofold. So it was a hardship on our community for a very long time. So as we talk about annexation, let's also consider the de-annexation too, and the effects that has. Those can be some generational effects on communities, especially some of the impoverished areas and those that really need the help the most.
Thank you. I have to tell you how informative you gentlemen have been We sincerely appreciate your sharing with us today. These are the things and additional, I'm sure we will be facing. I'm going to incorporate all land usage. We have such a diverse state. You've got availability. We have people that don't have space, but they want to put things in. But basically, you have shared with us a view of our very diverse state, and we appreciate it very much. Thank you. We do have additional speakers coming right now. I'm very grateful, and we kind of touched on some of the things. If we could get Todd Edwards and ACCG, you're going to share some information. And ladies and gentlemen, they are going to talk specifically in depth about salaries and how they are calculated. So if y'all will please take a seat at the table, and we're ready to hear from you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you give me just one moment. I'm Todd Edwards, the Deputy Legislator Director of the Association of County Commissioners. And with me is one of our interns who will speak a little bit at the end. I'll let, we call her W, but I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yuomeng Wang, and I go by W. I am a policy and research intern with ECCG. Thank you.
And I just have a few handouts that I want to provide to you all. And overall, two things when I give my presentation today that would be important, and I'm going to try to make this as clear as I can. There's a worksheet in here, and I hope you have your reading glasses. It's on how you calculate county official, both constitutional officer and other commissioner salary or county official salaries at the local level. And second, it's a guide in front of you that we put out every year called the County Computing County Officials Guide. And those are going to be very important reference as I go through all this. And if we could, pardon me for a moment.
Do you have those to be handed out?
Yeah, I'm going to
Okay.
get that right now. The guide I've had put in, it should have been in y'all's original folders. The worksheet is new. So I'm going to refer to both of them. And I mentioned earlier, and this is the guide. I think I'm set to go, and forgive me, I had to do a little organization there. We put this guide out every year at ACCG. It's for the counties, and it helps clarify how exactly to calculate the salaries of certain county officials and constitutional officers. It also covers other state officials that I'm not going to get into in great detail right now. So typically, counties have no ability to set the salaries of constitutional officers or of other elected officials, including, and what I'll speak today, are magistrates or coroners. This is either done through a local act of the General Assembly, or it is done by the calculations that you're going to find in your county computing or the salary guide there. Counties ultimately do have an opportunity to provide a supplement if they wish to increase these salaries, but overall, that is not a decision that the county makes. For counties that have local legislation, again, that's determined by the General Assembly, establishing salaries for particular positions, the salaries for those positions must be computed first using what's in here, and then compared, and this is all going to make more sense in just a moment. I'm just going over the generalities, then must be compared with what's in the local legislation, and the county official would get the higher of those two. A couple more generalities here. There's usually a base salary established according to the population of the county. In most cases, the latest population estimate is from the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, so this is often updated. If a county's population actually decreases in between censuses, the county official is entitled to receive the base salary of the previous census and the higher population so long as that official remains in office. General provisions. And for this, not picking on any particular constitutional officer, but I would recommend, and it would be easy to go along, either looking at the salary, the individual worksheet, or if we look at the sheriffs, and that's on page 21 of your bigger guide, because that's what most people are, I think, are more familiar with. And this is just objectively explaining the best I can how these salaries are calculated. General provisions. Although there may be some differences among the procedures to be followed for calculating minimum salaries, there are a few principles that tend to be the same. So we look at state required supplements. So if you're looking on that page, we mentioned earlier that there's a population bracket. And you've got them from 0 to 6,000 folks all the way up to larger counties. So then you go over each constitutional officer in this case, and there are supplements for each one. And in this case, the sheriff, you could add an additional supplement if that sheriff serves more than the superior court of each county. That supplement on that page is $4,630.80. And that is one, there was legislation that would have changed that, increased it for additional courts last year. That did not pass. The General Assembly may consider it, but first step, base salary. Second, you look at the state required supplement for the duties performed by that constitutional officer. After that, then you look at the longevity of that salary of that officer to determine the salary. Longevity means basically 5% pay increase for every 4-year term that is served by that officer. So we start with a base salary, we look at the mandated settlement or a supplement, and then we add longevity. Now, on top of that, the next step in calculating constitutional salaries is to look at state required COLAs. It was mentioned earlier, but each time that the state gives a pay raise, a COLA, a merit increase, and we'll call it a COLA or merit increase to state employees, you may not know this, but the majority of these, in fact, all of them that I mentioned today, all these salaries or these officers get that same increase. Usually y'all pay in 2%, 3% supplements. Some years you don't when COLAs. Sometimes you don't for state employees when times are hard. This year was different. And that it was not a 2 or 3% increase, but a $5,000 pay increase that was given to state employees. What does that mean? The county commissioners or county officials, the constitutional officers, including commissioners, they get a $5,000, a lump sum $5,000 increase to their salaries. And it's in the form of a COLA, but that is given to all. So now what we have is if we look at the base population, I'm going to go back to this bracket here because sometimes, a lot of times when officers come up here and say they want a pay raise, a lot of legislators who may not be as knowledgeable as y'all will be today on how this is calculated may look in the state statute and say, okay, I got a population of between 11,890 and 19,000. My constitutional officer, in this case, the sheriff, would be making $64,000 a year. Well, we see that that's not actually the case. That's the minimum base salary. On top of that, we've already done the supplement. We've already done the longevity. We've already done the COLAs. And then on top of that, you can have local acts or in addition, I guess in lieu of. So you get to what that salary would be calculated. I mentioned before, a lot of officers, particularly in larger counties, they have local acts, local legislation, which is passed that will say what the salary is for that office. And each time you compare it, what is the formula higher or is what the local act says higher? And the constitutional officer or the state officer gets the higher of the two. A couple of notes on that is the salary provided by the local legislation must be calculated. I did mention that and compared. And then in addition to that, local governments and county officials can add supplements to those salaries. So a couple of notes I forgot to mention earlier. The COLA stays with the office, not the officer. So every time you give a state pay raise, it's not just to the individual elected official, it's to that office. And then that stays, even though the statute says this base salary each year, that's actually going up every time you get a COLA. Madam Chair, did you have a question?
I actually do, and I hate to interrupt you. But,
No, I probably needed a breath there.
the $5,000 to county commissioners, that was something I thought was kind of controversial. I did not, and I'd been told that it did not specifically apply to commissioners unless a local legislation had been written saying that they were tied somehow to what the state was.
First of all,
or was that across the board?
First of all, I'm going to state that we have to have our own attorneys work on this. That's how complicated it gets.
Yeah.
I am not one, nor do I delve in this too often. Probably thankful I don't. So Bill Toomey, one of my, I forget your exact title, but he's our man in the field at ACCG. He knows a bit more about this. But as far as county commissioner salaries, did Bill leave us for the topic? Duet? He stepped out for a moment.
Okay.
So if we could hold that for just a
Okay,
moment,
we
but I
will.
think through local act, which are what governs for the most part county commissioners, speaking specifically to county commissioners, Most of them have the provisions and they're all over the board, but their salaries do increase. It's may not be all, but I think most. And then how it applies to all the officers. I mean, if you go into individual statute for each of these constitutional or other officers, it will have a provision in there that states that, you know, it basically you'll see it in the statute, the language so that these apply. Did you have an answer for that or you anything to add? Not at this point?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I mentioned on top of that from local supplements. I also state that no matter how county employees are paid in an individual county, county officials, the ones that we're talking about today, are paid on a monthly basis. And that's also required by law. We mentioned what's in law and what you see on the books when you're talking about salaries. Sometimes against that doesn't show the true salary because we at least know there's that $5,000 COLA. But the last time they were updated for constitutional officers, these brackets was effective 2021. I think that was revised in 2019, if I'm remembering correctly, because you gave across the board 5% pay raise for constitutional officers. So that not only brought all the COLAs back into that number, and then you add 5%. So that's the number we're going on. Now it's all going to make sense to you because I'm going to go over to your worksheet here. This is accounting. If we look at let's just do the probate judge in this instance. That's the second column over. So you'll see that in this county, the base salary was $55,344.71. Or let me do the sheriff since we're on that page, and I apologize. Look at the base salary of $64,255.19. You can look. And let me pull up the sheriff's once again on your page 21. And you can tell right off the bat that this county population is between 11,890 and 20,000. So I'm trying to make this as simple as possible, but just by looking at the base salary, that's how you know what the size county we're talking about. So if you go down this line on the column first on the worksheet, you can tell that there's a supplement that the sheriff receives. It's also on page 21 of the other document. For serving an additional court in addition to Superior Court. So you add on the top of the 64, 4,630, right? Now we're up to 68,885. Then you add the longevity. There's a 10% in longevity, so you know that that sheriff has served 2 terms, 5% for each term. Now our salary goes from 68,885,000 to 75,774. Okay, in addition to that, you add 1,515. That's the 2% COLA for 2020. Remember, I said that they were updated in 19, so we're just going forward from there. Now we're at $77,000. No COLA in 21, no COLA in 22, but additionally, what y'all passed to the 22 budget was a $5,000 pay increase, which for us is effective in 2023. So that's added. So when you look at the book, you'll see it says this sheriff's salary is $64,255, but in actuality, the sheriff in this case, in this county, is getting paid $82,290. And that's law. I'm not saying whether that's good or bad, too high or too low, but I'm here to try to explain that that's how you calculate these salaries. And it's not what you see in the book. It's all the other provisions that are lined in there.
You have a quick question from Maynard, Representative Maynard?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes,
It is a
ma'am.
quick question. For the 10% longevity, basically, these constitutional officers are getting raises to be elected.
Oh, I
In
don't know that I
simple
would
terms.
word it that way. They get a 5% pay increase for each 4-year term served.
So if they get elected, if they continue to be elected, they will,
5% each time.
okay.
And that's why you can't go by what's in here when you're trying to understand their salaries. Again, I'm not making an argument today. I want to make clear, not good, about. I'm trying to be as objective as possible in stating that what you see here is not what's actually being paid and why, because it's very difficult to understand. I'm trying to make it as streamlined as possible in explaining it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Actually, my sheriff has been there over 40 years. So he's getting a nice little bump there, and which is fine. We have good control. I'm making a comment. Please continue. I'm sorry.
W, did you have something?
No, I'm just saying the maximum.
The maximum, it is cut off at a, tell them. Please, this is the first time.
Thank you, Todd. So I remember, if I remember correctly, the maximum of longevity is 55 maximum, 55% maximum.
Okay, thank you.
there are more questions because specifically I did want to, I know there's been a lot of discussion. We
Yeah.
looked at the corners issue last year and I'd like to explain that. And also
Please.
I feel free on if anyone out there, if I'm stating anything correctly, because sometimes it is confusing incorrectly. It's not on purpose. I'm glad to be corrected or to say that I was mistaken.
No,
So
Representative, let's see, number 25,
Yes.
you got another question?
You
ma'am?
know, so that's interesting because we're talking about the potential of consolidating rural areas. And if someone in a rural area has been a sheriff for 30 years, you can see why they may not want to consolidate if they're going to
Yes, you can.
lose a salary like that.
Thank you.
and again, that is capped. I'm not sure if it differs between constitutional officers, but it is capped on what percentage it can be increased due to the longevity. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
So on corners, if you look at page 10 of the large guide that I provided to you. Now, corners are not constitutional officers. They are elected county officials, and at least a good many of their salaries are controlled through statute, and you're going to see that here. So let's go first with those salaries of corners in counties with populations, and you can also look back at your worksheet if you want to reference that too. In counties with 35,000 people or more. So corners in these counties are paid either and they're entitled to be paid a death investigation fee of $175 when no jury is impaneled, or $250 per death investigation when a jury is impaneled. However, they could also be, or not also, but instead of be paid by a local act. So a local act is something worked out at through General Assembly, through a bill y'all passed. Hopefully you've got the input of your local, your county, your corners that sets up the salary. So it's one or the other, basically. As if you just go by, you don't have the brackets for counties with 35,000 or more, but you get paid by death investigation, or you get paid by the local act. Corners with populations of 30, well, I will say that they get to choose, the coroner gets to choose that. We worked with them some years ago to know in advance for budgetary reasons, to be notified at the county level by October 1st in any given year, to become effective January 1st, so we could budget appropriately whether or not that coroner desired to be paid by what is in the local act or by investigation fee. So corners in counties with a population of 35,000 or less, or let's say 34,999 or less. And that's what's governed in state statute. So they do have brackets for those, and you'll see down there, just like the sheriff's population between 11,889 is 1,200. 1189 through 20. So that'd be their base salary. But we already know through what we just went through that those numbers are not correct, because you at least have to add $5,000 to each one of those to give the pay raise that was given to state employees last year. Again, this is for counties with populations of less than 35,000 people. So they get that base salary. And in addition to that, they get the $175 per death investigation fee when no jury is impaneled, and $250 when a jury is impaneled. So that is in addition to the base salary. And in addition to that, you go through the steps as you would earlier. You would add longevity, and then you would go through the COLAs. And if you look on page 11, there are a lot of COLAs, and it does get confusing, but it makes sense when you've done this for a while, because honestly, the coroner salary has not been updated in statute for that long a period, since I guess at least 2002, sometime just before that, I imagine. Whereas the magistrates was last year, constitutional officers were a few years ago. We brought all those up to date. So in addition to whatever's there, you start going through all these COLAs. And then in addition to that, I think I won't say in addition to that, but the 2023 $5,000 state employee pay increase did apply to the counties with less than 35,000 in population, unless that coroner salary is governed by a local act, and then they get to choose the higher of the two. Or they don't get to choose, they get the higher of the two. So did all coroners receive a $5,000 pay increase? No. Not those with 35,000 population or above, or the ones that didn't with 35,000 or below 35, because they've elected to go by local act to govern their salary. We go through the supplements. I mentioned earlier, you compare to local legislation, and there are the provisions in here that go for that apply to paying deputy coroners. Every county coroner must have at least one deputy coroner, and he or she appoints them. Deputy coroners have to be approved by the governing authority, if there are to be any. It states, we state how their pay is calculated in here, on $35,000 or more, or 35,000 population or more. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through this unless y'all have any questions. And then how deputy coroners are paid if you're going through your larger guide with 35,000 or less. And then it does have provisions in statute whereby the training, the per diem, the mileage, and how that is calculated and paid by the county. If I messed anything up, it's because I stuttered. I didn't get it. I didn't understand. It wasn't intentional, but I'm happy for any corrections. I know the coroners may be speaking for later, but if I'm not correct on any of those, I welcome correction. I could go through more. I won't. If y'all have questions on that, I'm happy to pause, and then I'll have any
You
additional
do have
comments.
a couple questions. Representative Leverett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to be with you all today. I'm glad to make it. Thank you, Todd, for your testimony.
It's always a pleasure, sir.
Did I understand you? I was also trying to follow along in my guide here. For the counties that are under 35,000, you still get the per death investigation fee, and in addition to the base salary with the COLAs, just like you. Well, I don't know, just like you do, but just as you can receive those fees in addition to a specified salary for 35,000 more, you also get that if you're less than 35,000.
Okay, if I understood you correctly, let's deal with the population's less than 35,000, right?
Yeah.
Yes, the fees are in addition to salary.
Okay.
And is that correct? I mean, if I'm saying anything wrong, I want.
Well, as I was asking the question, I did find where it's in the text too. So I kept looking down here below and didn't see it, but I see it above. So I think that is the case.
In addition to whatever COLAs, remember from what you're seeing in statute, in addition to 5,000, all that, and then yes, the fees are.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Chairman Oliver, do you have a question?
How many counties still have coroners? And how many counties contract with the medical examiner in lieu of a coroner, even if they have an elected coroner?
That is an excellent question. I don't have that answer. I know primarily the larger counties in metro area, they'll probably know that, have gone through a medical examiner instead of a coroner. And but I don't have that number. I can tell you that there's a process if you want to know, or if at the pleasure of the committee, of how one would go with a medical examiner as opposed to a coroner, but I don't have the number on who's done that.
I'm trying to remember, and I'm sure the coroners can help me. We had some statutory analysis of what required a medical examination, autopsy, and what didn't, and that changed a lot of local practices on coroners. But
That's-
somebody can explain that to me. I
And
don't remember.
perhaps they could better.
Yeah.
But,
Okay, I actually do have a question. And what is the difference between a medical examiner and a coroner? And what education process do you go through? I want to know the distinction.
To be a coroner, you have to be 21 years old. To be a medical examiner, you have to be 25.
Okay,
High school education,
Okay,
and
so-
obviously a medical examiner is an MD.
I have it here in front of me. Medical examiner, first of all, you have to approve local legislation, then it has to be approved on a local referendum. To be eligible to be a medical examiner, you have to have a doctor of medicine degree and be licensed to practice medicine. You also must be eligible for certification by the American Board of Pathology. To be a coroner, you've got to be a citizen of the United States. You got to be a resident of the county. You got to be a registered voter. You have to be over 25 years or older, have a high school diploma or a recognized equivalent, and not been convicted of a felony involving moral turpitude. Those are your qualifications.
okay. Okay,
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, there's questions on should it all be an elected office, but when I say that it should be up to the county, that is true, but you first have to go through a referendum. So that is the voting process. But once it's approved, then correct, the county or the, whoever it be would appoint the medical examiner. Thank you.
Okay, and Chairman Collins?
Quite frankly, you have to have an MD to be a medical examiner. You have to have common sense to be a coroner.
And
Okay.
I hope I didn't say anything that contradicted. I brought all the statutes because I wanted to make sure I didn't get this wrong.
Well, again, this is not something I delve into. So if you just have someone that dies, no questions. What happens if it's something that there's questionable? Do coroners go in and make that decision, or does somebody have to go to the state level and get a medical examiner when they think there's something unusual about it?
If someone passes away and they're not under a doctor's care, or there's trauma involved, a prosecutable case, then the coroner will get involved, or a medical examiner. Here in our state, if you're a coroner and you go out to a scene and there's some question as to whether there's going to be an autopsy performed, the coroners would call that case into the crime lab, the ME's office at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and they would have an investigator that consults with the coroner and to determine the cause and manner of death. And in some cases, the GBI would request that decedent be transported over for an autopsy.
Okay, and there's no requirement anywhere that you have to have a medical examiner. A coroner is in statute that we have to have a coroner in every county. I'm asking that question.
You need to speak to the,
Yeah,
Either or,
Correct.
okay.
yes.
So, and if,
counties in Georgia have medical exam.
okay,
Clayton County, I'm not sure exactly how they operate there.
Clayton County is the only county that actually contracts.
okay.
And we don't know about the legality of that, but the rest of the counties are all.
Okay. Rosen and Burnell, you have a question?
I just wanted to know if we could get a copy of that information, the differences.
Okay.
Or is it in our packet already? That when you were
I'll
telling us the
have to get
difference?
back to you on that. I did not put that in your pack. You mean in state law under the qualifications?
Mhm.
Yeah, we'll get that information and we'll send it to everybody on the committee.
Okay, and then I will find out about Clayton County. Thank you.
And
Representative Maynard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there how many counties have salaries based, do you know how many counties have salaries based on local acts versus using the bracket?
at some point, Madam Chair, I wanted to refer to W because we're doing that research right now. And
Okay.
it would seem to be an easy number to come up with. When you're looking at all this going back and forth, it's not, but we do want to explain that while we're on the salary issue. If
Please.
I hear some talking behind me, perhaps there's an answer, or they could share it with you later if they.
Okay, and I have two more questions. So I would like that information when you do get it. And I know the answer to this, but I just want to ask for the record. Can you go over the discretionary funds that the constitutional officers have and how they're using that money in an audit?
So we're going beyond salary and other constitutional officers by discretionary. I think there are certain revenue sources or generators, I would say issuing passport fees by the clerk of court, by which revenue is generated $25,000 or $25 per passport application processed. I didn't necessarily want to get into that today, but oftentimes that is kept as personal compensation, which would in turn increase that salary. I'm sure in other cases that the clerk may turn it over to the county or to run the office, et cetera, but I'm not prepared to speak on that today.
Can the local Board of Commissioners tell them how they can spend those
No.
dollars? Okay. The discretionary funds they can be given, but the county commission cannot
Well,
dictate. how
they have to
spend.
be statutorily authorized to
Okay.
collect funds for collecting certain duties. It might be the probate judge with administering vital records. There's someone issuing, there's commissionary funds. I think we discussed last year within the sheriff's department. There might be issuing, you're more familiar with that than I am. They issue passport application fees, but those, A, it's authorized in statute, B, it goes to the constitutional officer. And that constitutional officer decides whether to keep that as personal compensation, whether to put in the county's general fund, whether to throw an office ice cream party. That's up to the individual
Okay.
officer.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I know you had more
Pizza party,
questions.
perhaps.
So So a sheriff, it doesn't matter, for the commissary funds, they could be making $100,000, not making, but they could be receiving $100,000 in discretionary funds. And there's no way of knowing if they're going to use that $100,000 per se, just as an example, to go towards personal salary, or if they will opt to give it back to the general fund.
Yeah, I prefer, I'm not educated on that particular area. Last year I had to send you to Clint, or if Bill's in here and has a response.
I would love to hear his response.
Does he look like he has one? Bill, come on up. Sorry, man, are we okay?
No, it's good. These are good questions.
He may want to address some of the other issues.
Yes, good morning. Bill Toomey with ACCG. And Representative, to your question, yes, there are funds that flow through various constitutional officers that officer does have complete discretion over. Then there's some shades of gray. There are some revenue sources that flow through those offices that there are general guidelines for the expenditure, but still the officer would have discretion. One that comes instantly to mind is when tax commissioners collect taxes for municipalities. I know the legislature somewhat addressed that issue in this past session. But the commission, if you will, that's paid by the municipality to the tax commissioner can, in certain circumstances, be the tax commissioner's personal compensation. There is no oversight by the county commissioners of that contracted amount between the municipality and the tax commissioner, even though, think about it, county resources and county employees, or the employees in that office that are paid by the county, are being used to perform that service. So I think that's a common point to address your question.
Thank you. Is that all?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Representative Burnell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did find out Clayton County has a medical examiner's office, and it was approved by the GBI.
Thank you. Okay, please continue. Sorry, we keep interrupting.
The question was asked earlier on the difference between local acts, and whether or not the elected official goes by that, or what's in state salary. We're trying to find out all that out. And I'm going to let you explain, W, what research you're doing, maybe some of the challenges and where we're at in that process.
Thank you, Todd. Good morning, everyone. My name is Roman Wang. Again, I go by W. I am a policy and research intern with ACCG. So I'm here to provide you a brief summary of the salary analysis project I have been working on. As you know, often legislation is introduced in the General Assembly to increase salaries for county elected officials. To better assess and address the impacts of this type of legislation, ACCG started a new project this summer. What we are seeking is detailed information on how each county calculates salaries for county elected officials, including coroners, magistrates, sheriffs, tax commissioners, clerks of court, probate judge, and county commissioners. And also we want to see how pay raise legislation impacts those salaries. So after I got assigned to this project, I first reached out to all county managers and clerks in the state to request the contact of the person they think is best able to provide this type of information. In this survey, we have received 105 responses. That is a 66.04% response rate. The common contacts I received are the Human Resource Department and the Financial Department. I then emailed the HR, Financial Department, and county managers for non-respondent to request the copy of salary worksheets they use to calculate their elected official salaries. In my email, I also asked to identify whether the county is using local legislation or the statewide minimum salary law to calculate salaries for each official. So as of today, we have received 79 responses. That is a 49.69% response rate. Some committee prefer not to share their worksheet, but identify they use local acts or the statewide minimum salary law. And also some county are still working on gathering information from other departments in the county. So I have compiled 2 documents. So the Excel sheet, the total present the spreadsheet are the draft of the salaries of elected officials pulled from respondent counties worksheets. I note them with local act if the wages are set by local legislation. I also compiled a work document here to record the outlines of the respondent counties if they illustrate that they use local acts for the supplements and salaries on their worksheets. The challenge of doing these projects are first, this is our first time have requested this type of information for all the county in the state. So it takes time for them gathering the information, what we asked, and cooperate with us. So our project is still in process. Secondly, county may calculate the salaries based on local acts and local supplements. So it's hard to have the actual and accurate numbers. So we cannot guarantee the accuracy of the data since we may not be on the same page as county calculate the salaries based on local acts. Lastly, some county provide the fiscal year 2022 and 2023 salaries, and some provide the salaries from the prior year. And many did not including the $5,000 COLA pay raise that was approved for state employees in the state's fiscal year 2022 amended budget, an amount that also applies to county officials. I will keep working on following up with counties and expanding our database. So if you have any question, please talk and me know. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may summarize it, bottom line is it's incredibly challenging. We've got she's working full time trying to change it, but they may be apples and oranges. They may or not have included, the $5,000 because that came later after we started the survey. It's just become incredibly complicated, but we're going to get you the best numbers we can. We're going to do it within a month or 2.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will tell you, I went to my local county manager and he said virtually the same thing. And our finance person has been there 30 years. And he says he doesn't know with the complication of how these are calculated, how a new employee would ever learn to do it. It is very difficult and complicated.
It's very confusing, particularly when y'all are asked to speak or address legislation, possible pay raise maybe. And all you have to look at are those numbers, that are in statute, which is we've learned today, may be close, they may not be. There's a lot of variables. It changed. There's local legislation, et cetera. It takes a heck of a lot of time. It certainly doesn't lend itself to transparency to you, the elected officials who are making these tough decisions governing local official pay.
Thank you. You have some questions, Representative Maynard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first thought is it can't be that complicated. People are getting paid because otherwise, they know what their salary is. That salary has got to be coming from some equation. So I don't understand
Perhaps it's not difficult at the local level for individual counties, but for someone like us to put it all together, it becomes more challenging. But at the local level, if you're doing it, they've gotten used to it. They know which one governs what.
So if one of us go to the local level, as Chairman Taylor said, then it shouldn't be that difficult if they're getting paid.
That's true. If at the
It looks like it's all the adjustments and you add a COLA on a COLA on a COLA.
Yeah, they're working it out. They'll know what
Yeah.
to look like. I'm just saying for us to understand it, even as their association, to compile it all into one document and make sure that, they're all on the same page with communicating, that gets more challenging. But no, they'll figure it out. They know what at the local level.
And then the other question is, if the 79 responses, I don't understand how a governmental body can choose not to give information. And so if you don't get the information, if there is someone's choosing not to give the information, is your next step to do a FOIA request or a Georgia Open Records Act?
No, we as their Man,
Please.
we would not do that with our members, but as we learned earlier, we've got a county commissioner. How many hats did he wear? You know, the same with these smaller counties. May only have a clerk to do all administrative activities. They've got their hands full with everything else, providing this information. As much as they may like to do it, it just may not be possible in a timely manner. And plus, it's a lot of other information we ask them annually on all the other legislation that we deal with hundreds of issues at ACCG. Do we want to know what design standards they're employed? Do we want to know how they're dealing with their economic development authorities? Every issue up here, we try to compile information of all those that we face, and many of you have worked on in this committee, development authorities, or design standards, build to rent subdivisions. So we're trying to get this information for all of them. But it's just one more thing, particularly for to add to their plate.
And then for the county commissioner salaries, I was reading through here. It says if they want to increase their salary, the only way they can do that is if they advertise it at the local level. But it did not say anything about after it's advertised, there's a collective vote for the board. Or is there no collective vote and they can just advertise a salary increase?
Now, I'm not an expert on this, but I should have pointed out earlier that county commissioners do have the authority to raise their own salaries. But in able to do so, they have to go through a process. I'm trying to find it right here. It needs to basically go, Bill, you may know if I don't, I don't say that, three public hearings.
And advertised.
Advertised locally, 3 public hearings. And there might be something else. However, so it's not as easy as, well, depending on, that's a subjective term. It's not that they can come up and ask the General Assembly to give them well, they can get it through a local act, or they could do it themselves. Politically, it's difficult to do it yourselves because they have to go before the public, the notification, the hearings. I'll let that decision be made at the local level, but that may not be the wisest decision to make as a county commissioner.
Representative Anderson, you have a question?
Well, I'm really more of a comment to Representative Boehner's question about being able to accumulate this information. We got to understand the timing that we're dealing with right now. Most counties are finishing up, well, they have finished their budgeting process. They're going through millage rate hearings. There's a lot of things going on in the county that could prohibit and delay getting a response to a very well-meaning but somewhat lower priority request like this. So,
Thank you.
Take it from someone who's been there. Yes, sir.
Representative Leverett, did you have a question?
I just one comment. When you talked about that, there is as Todd mentioned, there is a process by which a county or a city council can increase its own compensation. But Todd accurately described it. There is, I think we have intervened as a legislature into that process and imposed certain restrictions, which you described, as well as I believe the raise cannot take effect until after the next election.
Yeah, and I would state to that, honestly, in years of experience, I've been doing this a while. There have been counties that have come up to you legislators, asked, can you change our local act to give me a pay raise? And if I were in your shoes, I mean, I might say, well, don't you have the authority to do that yourself? Why should we take the political heat? So that, it becomes difficult to actually do that. They can't. Well, it's just a more difficult process.
But to me, the local
lobby
act
you all directly.
is the way to do it a little quieter. The statutory process is one where greater notice is afforded to the public.
At the local level. And I might add, I mean, I wasn't going to get into proposed legislation or proposed pay increases today, but it may be worthy of the General Assembly's consideration to state whatever pay raise is given to a local official, even if it's governed by state statute, then in order to get it, y'all approve it, in order to get it, that county official must run 3 ads in the paper and get before a public meeting of the county commission and say, yes, I want and I deserve that pay raise, and then we'll give it to them to put it under the same standard. I think that would be fair and equitable so that any of those wishing to get the pay raise, they would advertise it and they would state so publicly.
The $5,000 that the state just gave to them, right now, they don't have to vote on that. They don't have to do anything. It doesn't go before the public.
It's done.
It's done. Okay.
And we're just making the adjustments to a budget for it. And we've got more calls, and Bill
Just
can
adjust
answer to
this.
this on that one particular issue than anything I can remember in the past 10 years coming from the General Assembly. And y'all, most folks didn't know that. I mean, y'all are giving state employees a pay raise, and that more power to you. But a lot of folks didn't realize that how many county folks that applied to, and it has impacted the budget significantly. I'll be honest, we didn't take a position at ACCG. Our membership, they were torn, debated. We went through our policy council, and it was to stay neutral. I mean, otherwise you would have heard from me during that process. We tried to educate legislators, but we did not take a position as an association.
Okay, thank you. Representative Brownell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question I had about the $5,000 was that, does it only go to that elected official that's under this paid under the state, or does it go to everybody in their office?
It's just the elected official. Now that it's kind of unique in the judgeships. I don't know all that, but it's the elected official. So you got your 4 constitutional officers. In this case, it would have gone to the coroners and 34,999 or less, unless it was governed by local act. It goes to the county commissioners, unless there's a unique provision in that a local act, but just the elected officials, unless you can think of anyone else whose salaries are magistrates.
I was going to say, I believe our magistrate, we brought local legislation that it will be whenever other raises or COLAs are given, they would get it automatically, but it would be done through local from one of my counties.
And then on the question about the commissioners, because I did this enough, so I kind of know. I brought, our commissioners wanted a raise, and I brought the local legislation. And because of the salary increase that my chairman wanted, I had to pull that legislation twice, and then finally we just let it go. But if we vote on it and we tell them, then they get the raise immediately. That's why they did. That's why they want us to bring it as local legislation. If it comes as local legislation, then they can get their raise immediately. But what we did for our school board last time is we've given them permission to give themselves a raise. So now they will have to go in front of, their board, vote on it, tell the public why they need it. And it just made it easier because it took it off of us. So, and then other than that, yes, they don't get the raise until the following. If they give it to themselves, they don't get it till after the election.
A quick question, because I did ask about the corners and the MEs. What kind of training or continuing ed do commissioners have to do to get these raises or get their pay? Do they earn it, or they just get it from being elected?
You said county commissioners, correct?
County commissioners.
The initial training that's required by statute has to be in place before the $100 per month increase is given to county commissioners. But there is nothing else in statute that gives statutory pay raises for additional training. Carl Vinson Institute and ACCG partner with Lifelong Training Academy that commissioners go through. There are provisions sometimes in local legislation, it's rare, but there are some provisions in local legislation that would give training increase to commissioners, but it is extremely rare. It's normally simply that $100 per month basic training increase.
But they have to go through newly elected as elected, and then for additional money, go through the additional training.
That's correct.
Could you repeat that in the mic?
Yes, Todd brought up the point. Included in the training that would allow for that $100 increase is newly elected commissioners training that's required statutorily, and is part of that original training requirement that gives them the $100.
And just to be difficult, did this $5,000 apply to city councils?
No.
Thank you. I didn't think so. Okay. Representative Oliver, you have a question?
I want to come back to the supplement issue in DeKalb County. The supplement issue creates a train for many other elected officials or unelected officials, including county commissioners, including the CEO. I agree. I'm aware that the county commissioners can raise their own salaries pursuant to the statutory opportunity they have. Can they raise the salary of the Superior Court judge supplement?
No.
Are you sure of that, Matt?
No, well.
I'm not. I mean, I don't know.
Okay,
I think
we have the answer.
The state constitution does allow for local supplements to be provided to any level of judge by either the local government, the county government itself adopting the supplement, or the General Assembly can pass a local act providing for the supplement. But there's also a provision of the state law governing the salary of Superior Court judges that caps the local supplement that can be provided by the local governments.
So for DeKalb County, who's already reached the cap of $50,000, I interpret your answer to be that DeKalb County Commission cannot further increase the Superior Court judge salary.
Correct, but the General Assembly could pass a local act for most, and that most of the metro counties, I think, have reached that level as well.
They could only pass a local act if they had not reached the $50,000 cap.
No, the General Assembly can exceed the $50,000 cap if it wishes. The General Assembly can force a county to pay above that amount.
There's a legal opinion out there from a private law firm that says that, but I've never heard a legal opinion from Ledge Counsel or the Attorney General that the existing statutory $50,000 cap can be ignored by a local act. And I think that's what you just said. And we're down a rabbit trail here, and I apologize, but I really think I keep hearing different
I
interpretations.
apologize that I don't have anything informative to add to this discussion.
I could give you an answer right now. We could talk privately. My reading of the statute that sets the cap says that it only applies if once you reach the $50,000, that cap only applies to additional supplements made by the Board of Commissioners. The General Assembly can still pass a local act if it wished. So my opinion is in line with the opinion that private legal opinion that's floating around.
Have you issued, as you being legislative counsel, issued a written opinion on that matter?
Not that I'm aware of.
I requested several years ago that the chair of the Judiciary Committee get some kind of opinion about this, because it's a continuing argument that came up on.
Does that actually come through a judiciary committee, or is that something you would like for governmental affairs to look at?
I'm not making that request, Madam Chair. I'm just trying to figure out on day 40 at 8 p.m. when we're having an argument on the floor about, I was totally confused.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Representative Maynard, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the coroners, we said earlier that the only time that the medical examiner would come is if the coroner decided, and I guess maybe this might be a question for the coroner.
You might want to hold that question, because that's who's next. We're ready to have them come up now. Representative Brown, do you have a quick question?
I was just going to say that in terms of when we were talking about the raises for the Superior Court judges and just those that we do for local legislation, it always becomes a problem because they come to us, they ask us to carry the legislation to give them a raise. And so then they have to go back to the county. So the process is, it can become a problem because we don't really know if the county has the money to pay the extra supplements and those things like that. All they want to know is that they want to raise and they want us to bring that local legislation. So it is very controversial.
It is very much so. And it often puts us as their representatives in disarray because the commissioners may not want it, your judges do. So we get all that.
In closing?
Yes.
May I?
Yes.
Just want to thank you all very much. These are complex issues. The past couple of days, you've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about counties. It's hard to follow in the shoes of the panel before us. Y'all will continue to get requests for statutory pay raise for various county officers, constitutional officers. I would just urge you to consider them very closely and to recognize that you as legislators already have that authority. You can do so through local legislation. If one size doesn't fit all, work with your local elected officials, whichever officer is asking the pay raise, pass local legislation. That's a good way to address it so that the unintended consequences don't go statewide, particularly some of the smaller counties that might not be able to afford it, and understand what they're actually getting paid. And that helps us all and you all in making these decisions. And I'm honored to have been given the opportunity to walk the best I could through the pay scale, the calculations.
Thank you very much. This was a very complicated issue. We appreciate the in-depth nature of how your report was to us. Thank you very much.
We'll get those numbers as soon as we can. We're being very careful with it.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more presenter. If you would come forward, do you all want to go to the desk or down to the table? Please come forward. It's been a long morning. I'm sorry we started a little short, a little late because of the rain and giving some folks a chance to get here. So thank you for your patience. Please introduce yourselves.
I'm Danny Mathis. I am State Representative District 144, and we've been talking about a coroner bill for a year or so. A little bit of more background on me before Ted introduces himself. I've been in the coroner business over 30 years. I was coroner 18 years. My daddy was a coroner before me for 40 years. So deputy coroner, that sort of thing, we've come up in this. And, there have been a lot of questions about coroners. And the only statement that I'm going to say now is a coroner, is Ted's going to get real in depth on most everything for me. He's an expert on that. But the coroner's office is one of the oldest offices in the state. The duties of the coroner is to determine cause and manner of death based on the law enforcement's investigation and a medical examiner, okay? And that's what we do. And that's why that 3-tier standard there works in this state so well. And we're in a dilemma right now. As you know, as legislators, we've been trying to pour money into the GBI forensic part. We can't hire medical examiners. We can't hire the forensic doctors. There are none. You know, we had money in the budget, took it back, had money in the budget to get someone to go to school at Mercer to get that degree, no takers. So we feel like what we need to do is keep the coroner system, since it does work so well. We need to get it to a standard that we keep good people in these jobs, because you well know that if we don't do that, these salaries that we talk about, if we don't have competent people in it, we do have a lax in what's done. When we have someone that dies and it goes through a coroner's office and it goes through the GBI crime lab, all the things that they do affect families, loved ones. We're at a dilemma now where we're having to wait 2 weeks before they can even do an autopsy. So coroners are having to keep these bodies, some of them 3 weeks over here. Ted's going to get really into it, but that's what I'm trying to tell you. We've been working on dilemmas in the legislature about the departments into forestry, agriculture, Department of Labor, where we don't have competent people working in some of these jobs. We have a big turnover. People are leaving because the salaries are no good. We understand that. So that's why we're trying to ward off a problem now before it gets worse, because we're already in a problem. We can't get blood alcohol, we can't get toxicologies, we can't get those things back. So we just need to work together. We're trying to make sure, we're not trying to go over anything. Ted's really going to get into this, but I was just trying to set up for the legislators in here to see what we've already dealt with through all these other agencies in our state. So what I'm saying, instead of fixing the problem after it's happened, let's fix the problem before it happens. And then that way we'll have an opportunity to have a good system. I think it's a great system, but we do need competent people to do it. So I'm going to turn it over to Ted. I'm going to let him introduce himself, and we'll answer any questions when he finishes.
My name is Ted Bearden, and I'm here representing the Georgia Coroners Association. I am the coroner in Dawson County. Been with the coroner's office there over 30 years. I want to address a couple of questions that were asked earlier, if I could. Coroners and medical examiners. You read kind of the qualifications for the coroners, but it's actually a little bit more in depth than that. Once you're elected, you can't actually serve until you take the approved courses at the police academy. In order, some of those are investigative type courses, some of them are law, and but there are additional training other than just what the qualifications to run for the office. The medical examiner. In order to be a medical examiner, you have to be a medical doctor. You have to specialize in pathology, after which you have to specialize in forensic pathology. So there's actually multiple levels in the nation right now. And I'm not going to be totally positive my figures are accurate, but they're close. I think there are positions in the United States for 1,700 forensic pathologists. Of those 1,700 positions, there are only 1,300 board certified forensic pathologists in the nation. So therefore, the state of Georgia is competing with New York, Los Angeles, Houston, Chicago, New Orleans, and they can't hire the doctors. There is a tremendous shortage of doctors at the medical examiner's office right now. And because of that shortage, Representative Mathis was exactly right. We are holding bodies now up to 2 weeks before we can even take them to the lab. I'm holding a lady right now that when I called the case in, there were 94 cases ahead of her. And once they get to the lab, they're not doing the autopsies for another week. So now we are talking to families who their loved one is going to require an autopsy, but you can't expect to have your son, brother, father, or mother return to you for 3 weeks. That's tough. And that is much worse than it was the last time that I sat and addressed your group. I have talked to the medical examiner's office about a way to fix this problem. They do have a short-term plan in place. It is not going to be easy to pull off, and it won't eliminate the problem. It'll take the backlog from 90 to 20 so that when you call in, there's only 20 ahead of you. But then if they can go back to working at the same pace, it's going to climb back to 90 again. And it's just simply because the doctors are not available. And I think the state of Georgia has done a yeoman's job in trying to do that. Let me say this about the statute about coroners and medical examiners. If you read Georgia law, a coroner is required by law to notify the medical examiner's office on every death that is reported to their office. That is by law. Is every case reported to them? No. When Dr. Eisenstadt was there, I shared with you a directive from him on cases that he did not want us to call in on, and he gave us some guidelines to go by. Dr. Eisenstadt is not there anymore. And I've talked to Dr. Smith, and he has not set forth any guidelines yet. He's working on them, but right now the statute says we call every case in. But if I have an elderly lady with a lot of medical problems, she dies in her sleep, there are no mitigating circumstances whatsoever, then we're going to sign that out. She sees a doctor regularly, and there was a change made in the statute this year that if you have not seen a doctor in 180 days, you are deemed not to be under a doctor's care, even if you've been taking blood pressure medicine from Dr. Smith for 10 years. If you haven't seen him in 180 days, He's out of the picture. And that was just changed this year by the legislature. So our job is not getting any easier. And Representative Collins made a great statement the last time that I was here that, you know, there are those out there that want to talk about the coroners as a part-time position. And based on what I just told you, look at the man hours that are spent per case now on there. We don't have an office at the courthouse. We don't go in at 8 o'clock on Monday and get off at Friday on Monday and do that for 4 more days that week and then take the weekend off. That is not the way coroners work. 24/7, 365. And I'll be honest with you, my little office, I'm in a county of 30,000 people. My caseload last year was 130 cases or something like that. Somebody's going to have to explain to me what part-time is about that. We've had to, I own the funeral home there. And for many, many years, I just took what the county paid me. I didn't argue with them about money. I didn't go with them wanting this, wanting that. And if the money was in the budget to handle it, that's fine. If not, I just made it happen. I supplemented it personally. But then I reached a point where I said, you know, I shouldn't be. And I went to my commissioners and I explained it to them. I explained the job to them. I explained what was going on. And I'm not on the fee system, even though I'm under 35,000. I'm paid a salary. And even with what we are proposing, my salary is more than what is written in this bill. So I do not have a personal dog in this hunt. I'm trying to help all the other corners. And what I'd like to do today is just to give you a few examples of the problems with the pay for coroners, especially in counties of over 35,000. Madam Chairman asked me if I could compile some figures possibly the last time I was here. I probably spent 60 or 70 hours trying to do this on the phone, working when I could. I made a packet. I only brought 6 handouts. I wasn't sure how many people would actually be here today. I'll leave those packets here. You're welcome to do them, make copies. If you'll give me your email, I'll email them to you. But I did a spreadsheet of all the coroners in this state, and I talked to most of them personally and found out how they were paid. Now, the ACCG is totally correct about one thing. The counties with a population of under 35,000, where the coroners are receiving mandated salaries, are going to get that $5,000 raise. The ones in counties of over 35,000 may or may not. Each one of those coroners are going to have to go to their commissioners and work out, is that going to happen or not? And local legislation for the coroners, I only know personally of about 6 people who are paid under local legislation. Fortunately, one of them, their county has chose to kind of ignore it. But the thing about local legislation is once it's passed, it's permanent. And they say, well, the coroners has a choice, the coroners has a choice. That may be their opinion, but those commissioners they're dealing with don't share that same opinion, because there are 9 counties listed in this report of under 35,000 that are not compliant with the law now. The last time a salary issue was addressed for the coroners in this state was 32 years ago. There's been one change in 32 years, and that was somewhere around the year 2000. We did get the case fees raised from whatever they were at the time, up to $175. But that is the only change that has been made in any way concerning the salaries of coroners in 32 years. I'm going to give you just a couple of examples, and you can go through this information. I want to mention specifically Houston County. Houston County has a population of 164,833 people. Their coroner was paid a total salary of $40,200 a year, and his caseload was 500 deaths a year. He just quit. 40 years as the coroner. His commission would not give him any type of additional monetary gratitude, and he quit. 40 years of experience gone. Let's go to Liberty County. Population of 63,922. That's 100,000 people less than in Houston County. Their coroner's salary is $40,000 a year. He makes $200 a year less than the Houston County coroner was making, doing 500 death cases a year. And it is because every set of county commissioners that you go to in this state are going to have their own opinion. And if you are in a county of over 35,000, you're 100% at their mercy. Some county commissions understand it. Mine understands it. Thank God. But most of them do not. That's not right. And you can go through this. And over in red, you know, if you are the coroner in a county where you are not being paid properly by statute, and there are some that clearly are not right now, they only have one choice. And that choice puts them in a very, very difficult position. You go to your commissioners, you say, you're either going to pay me this or I'm going to sue you and you're going to have to pay my lawyer bill. Now, which do you want to do? But most coroners are kind-hearted. They do this job because of the love of their community, the love of their people. It's hard to, on Christmas Eve night, get out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and go to a car wreck of a teenager that was on his way home, and then go tell mom and dad, I'm sorry, but they're not going to be coming home tonight. If you look at the bill that we are proposing, those sheriff's salaries, according to what I've sat here and listened to today, are easy to calculate. There's a formula, and they can be calculated easily. For under 35,000, they can too, but not for over 35. But if you look at what the other elected officials are paid in this state, in each county, and you look at the amount of compensation that we're asking for, it's only a fraction, even though we're the time element, the amount of time. There's one coroner in this state, they don't even let him have a deputy. He covers his county full time. I mean, you can't even take your family to the next town over for a nice dinner because somebody's got to cover your county. There can never be a time that it's not covered. And this is a serious issue. And obviously, it's near and dear to my heart. because I'm spending my own time, my own money, and I'm not doing this for me. I'm an old head and I'm on my way out. But I can tell you this. I've talked to Dr. Eisenstadt before he left, and I talked to Dr. Smith. The only counties that have medical examiners' offices are the counties with a population large enough to have the money to pay that office. Because DeKalb County, Cobb County, Fulton County, they have to, GBI has lost medical examiners because those counties offered them more money to come because they need them. I think the starting salary for a medical examiner in the state of Georgia right now is somewhere around $180,000, $190,000. And as short-handed as the GBI is in every department they have over there, there is no conceivable way that the state of Georgia can go to a medical examiner statewide system. I mean, can you imagine how many more investigators they'd have to hire and just the logistics of that? They don't see that as any possibility in anywhere near future. And with that being said, unless we address this issue of some fair compensation for the work these people are asked to do, you are not going to find the next generation of people who are willing to put in the time and the effort that I have. And a lot of us that are, I call old heads, that are headed out. We've got to maintain the integrity of this office. The only way to maintain the integrity of this office is fair compensation for the people we're asking to do the work. And I'll entertain any questions.
You have a question, Representative Maynard?
Cut it off. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I remember you during the Governmental Affairs Committee, and I definitely supported everything that you said then, and I support it now. A couple questions. The first one is, you mentioned it's in statute where the coroner must call the medical examiner. They're currently not. And so if they're not, you want to say something?
They're not in certain cases.
Okay.
Okay. If there is a case that is not just clear cut and dried, and usually it involves the elderly that have a lot of medical problems. If we get out there and there is any gray area whatsoever, we're going to call that case into the medical examiner, and we're going to let one of the pathologists make the decision as to whether or not they come in for autopsy. The coroner does not have the authority to order an autopsy. The only person that has the authority for that is the medical examiner. Once we have collected all the facts regarding this case, then we call the medical examiner's office. We give them all of those facts, and then they tell us whether or not they're going to bring them in for autopsy or no. You can sign this out as hypertensive cardiovascular disease and go ahead and release the body back to the family.
So just as a healthcare professional myself, I do think that that's a challenge to have someone give a subjective opinion about an objective law, if that makes any sense. Meaning, if the law says you must, even if it's clear cut, it says you must, there's a subjective component saying, well, I don't think so, but the law says that you must. So I think that's troublesome. And so something needs to be done about that. The other thing is, for the classes that they must take after elected, do they have to pay for that out of pocket, or once
No.
they're elected?
No, the county is required to pay for that. and mileage and a daily per diem for going to school. Back to your previous statement, when Dr. Eisenstadt had issued his operations bulletin of you don't need to call this case in if it meets this criteria, then we were following what the ME was telling us to do. Dr. Smith just has not, he has been so busy since he took the office, he has not been able to do his operations bulletin yet.
Okay. And I guess a follow-up to that, and maybe Stuart can answer this. So if he's making an administrative bulletin, does then it become administrative law? And so it takes out the other piece to it where it's not statute because now it's codified in administrative law?
I'm not particularly familiar with the exact specifics of this case. The Georgia Administrative Procedures Act does spell out how official rulemaking is done by agencies that have been given rulemaking authority by the General Assembly. And that requires that in general, just the scope of that is before an official rule can, be considered, go into a force, there has to be notice and comment. The agency proposing the rule has to give notice that they're going to adopt a regulation. That notice gets published on the agency's website. Notice gets sent to the General Assembly. There has to be a public hearing at one of the regular public hearings. All of the agencies that have rulemaking authority have to hold public hearings, and so and then there's a certain period of time where that does not go into effect. The notice and the hearing have to be certain days apart, like I think 30 to 60 days. And once it goes through the final adoption process, then it would be an official rule that is published in the rules and regulations of the state of Georgia, which is maintained by the Secretary of State's office. So that's kind of the general rulemaking procedure for administrative agencies in the state. This particular one, I just am not familiar if the GBI medical examiner falls under that procedure, if it's a enforceable regulation or if it's more just an advisory type opinion. So.
Thank you.
And I will say this also, when we're out there on the scene, the coroner is not the only person there collecting information. EMS is going to do an assessment. Law enforcement is there, and the coroner is there as well. So the work that we do, we're working literally every case with other agencies as well.
Thank you. Representative Bernal.
Thank you, and thank you for this information. You mentioned about a deputy. What is the deputy's role?
Well, the deputy has to meet the same requirements as the coroner, take the same training, and they take, like my deputies, we rotate call so that especially on weekends, they take call, and when they're on call, they represent the coroner's office.
Okay, so, well, I guess that was just me. I thought it meant that you had somebody from the sheriff's department. That's why I was asking.
No, they're deputy coroners.
They're deputy coroners.
Yes.
And I know that we had this presentation with the coroners. Was this historically, this is how coroners have been for a long time, and now you all are trying to update what your roles are based on all the changes in today's society?
Well, I'm going to say this. I think one of the reasons that we are where we are today is the coroner's own fault. That's what I told my commissioners when I went before them asking for change. I said, we're not here by anything that you've done. we're here because I haven't been out here jumping up and down and screaming every year saying, give me this, give me this, give me this. I just took what you gave me and I made the office work, whatever it took, because I love this community. And I think the coroners have basically done the same thing with the legislature. A lot of the coroners out there have held these offices for a long, long time. But recognizing now that we're on the way out and the next generation coming along is not going to share the same outlook that we did, we have not hounded the legislature, and we have not been down here year after year begging for this, begging for that, begging for this. That's why it's been 32 years since the salary structure was put in place. And only once in 32 years has any adjustment to that, and that wasn't the salary, it was the case fees. So I guess the coroners have been their own worst enemy in that we've just sat back and did our jobs and didn't rough the waters. And but now it's time to correct it. Yeah, I mean, we need to fix it.
Thank you. You have another question, Representative Leverett?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Merriman and Danny. It's always good to see you. I'm glad to see you. My question for Mr. Merriman, I may have misunderstood you. Were you saying in your opening comments that there is one coroner who has attempted to appoint a deputy, but the county will not fund the position?
I didn't ask him in depth as to what those circumstances were, because I was trying to do this and work and everything else at the same time. He just made the statement to me that he did not have a deputy. But and the deputy coroners in my county, before we all went on salary, one of my deputy coroners, for us, call starts at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon and ends at 8 o'clock Monday morning. If by the grace of God, we didn't get a call, he got no compensation.
Really?
He donated all of that time to the county.
But he still had to be available.
But he had to be available and got zero. And that's why we got to address the compensation for the deputy coroners as well. And there's a lot of disparity in here about that. Going back to one of the counties that I mentioned earlier, with the 63,000, in addition to his salary of 40,000, he's got one full-time deputy that his county is paying $35,000 a year. And he's got two part-time deputies that the county still pays for their training and everything, but they only get case fees. We're in the middle of the budget process in Dawson County right now. And I meant to tell you this right up front. Representative Tanner mentioned that we grew up a mile from each other. We still only live a mile from each other, and he's my cousin. He didn't tell you we were related, but the 2022 for Dawson County, for my office, and I'm very fortunate, me and my deputies, our salary budget, just the salary budget, was $75,000 last year. And that's going up this year. I know it's going up 5,000.
Yeah.
Okay. But I would venture to say that if you ask the governor, if his intentions were for every elected official to get that $5,000 raise, his answer would be yes. But because there's nothing in the statute regarding counties of over 35,000, there are a lot of those elected officials, coroners, that are not going to get the 5,000.
You have another question, Chairman Collins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you both for being with us and working in the trenches there. I can say that my association with the coroner's office has always been professional. I was an apprentice under the county coroner in Carroll County, Mr. Sammy Edie, who taught me a lot about that process. And you're exactly right. I think we can't say enough about the people who are coroners and have been coroners. There's been a close association with funeral service. And most of the folks that I know in funeral service are good, hardworking people and do that coroner's job just out of a understanding that they're just providing a service to their friends and family that has to be provided when you do the work of the coroner. But one thing I've always wondered, and maybe Stuart could weigh in on this somewhat, but currently right now in code, if I'm correct, if you're the coroner and you want to appoint a deputy, that deputy cannot be an employee of the local sheriff's office or ME's office, or EMS office, those types of things.
I think they can be EMS.
Okay.
They can. I just remember going through school.
Right.
Initial training. And I don't know if it's in code, but I was specifically taught it was not a good idea to have a deputy coroner who also was a deputy sheriff.
Right.
Because Jerry Finley drew this big triangle on the board. And this tip was the coroner, and this tip was the ME, and on this tip over here was the sheriff's office.
Right.
And in order to do a thorough and complete and unbiased investigation, you needed to have those three distinct parts. So I've never considered making someone who's deputy sheriff a deputy coroner for that reason.
And let me continue with that also, but does that same approach apply to someone who may work for a local municipal police department in that specific county? And the reason I'm saying that is that the pool of people that want to do the job is very small.
Correct.
I mean, very, very small. Most of the people that I know that are deputy coroners are retired law enforcement who, just have relationships with people in the county and want to continue that type of service. And I was just wondering, is there anything in the statute that keeps a coroner from appointing someone who works for a municipality inside that county?
Not to my knowledge.
This has been a very interesting and very important. This will come up this session, and what I would like to see us do is work right now on this. And I want you to come. I appreciate the information you've brought for us. I want some recommendations. Do you think having it done by population level, are they too small? You were here, you heard some of the issues we had from Quitman County. I'm looking for a solution, and one size does not fit all. We have heard that all day. But we do need to find a way to have a meeting of the minds. And I think we can do that. And I want to see legislation this coming session and find a way to make this happen and make this work.
Well, we can look at that population chart,
Right.
especially at the very, very small county level,
Right.
and look for.
Frankly, when I look at what all the
some
COLAs
area
and 20
there.
years of these, I think we need to have a whole new bottom line
Right.
and do away with what's been happening in the past, come up with the new bottom line. The coroners right now are at the top of the list, but some of the others need the same thing. The complicated way that we are making these adjustments now doesn't need to be happening. It needs to
Right.
be fixed.
But,
And y'all are going to be at the top.
and
to
I
do
will
that.
respectfully disagree with one statement the ACCG made about local legislation. We all know how that works and we all know the process, but I just don't see it being a good idea to have
Well-
everybody wanting to do their own local legislation.
And that'll be part of our discussion. That is going to be part of the discussion. Again, I have some counties that want to pay more and they need to have a way to do it. But But I think that's something that needs to come in our discussions, and I may end up setting up a special subcommittee to have this ironed out where we can have all that information, and whether it be adjusting the size and the way it's compensated. And a lot of these things are in there. Local legislation is a tool. I'm not saying that it's a good or a bad one. In some
understand.
places it fits, in some it doesn't. But you have brought us some wonderful information. We appreciate that. And I look forward to getting this done next year. Thank you. And we will be adjourned, and we do have a second session this afternoon, but thank you all very much.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.
Thank you for allowing me the time.